around what options there are for second semester and looking at those, really sharing all the information we have to see what is really realistic and what is feasible and what we can do to get everyone back that can be back. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Salvatore. Ms. Horton for AFSCME. Grace, the podium is yours.
Yes, thank you. Good evening to you all. AFSCME has been working, kind of chasing the ball and the tail of all the workings that SDTA has done with the district. So we are feverishly working on catching up. We are still working with negotiating a COVID return safely for our employees with Jacqueline. And we are also trying to incorporate the small cohort language within our MOU. We should have that meeting, I believe, Friday. We just took a look at Ambry, the health screening. Sounds like that will be rolled out next week at the school site. So looking forward to how that's going to be utilized. And of course, there'll be feedback on that. Benny Hansen has been my best friend with communicating, and I thank you, Bonnie, for just being on the phone and multitasking with me, grabbing the phone and calling others. She's with me. She's helping me track down answers. We're looking for answers just so that we can stay ahead of all of this quickly developing inner workings of how to bring students back. What are we going to do? What is that going to look like, right? Everyone is interested in that. So with that, we also have Jacqueline spinning a few plates with job descriptions, just going back and forth. I know that I've also bent the ear of Crystal a few times. So thank you all for working with me and for making the time to have a chat and exchange emails with me. That's really what AFSCME strives to do, is to make sure that things are communicated to us so that we can be a partner, right? And staying ahead and on top of these very important issues here. I know that there's more which I'm probably missing, but I will end it there. Thank you very much for the time.
Thank you, Ms. Horton, and I'm really just delighted to hear about what sound like a series of very productive, ongoing discussions and collaborations. I will say the one bit of bad news is that I thought that Bonnie Hansen was my best friend, and so there's going to be some explaining to do at the end of this board meeting. All right, that brings us to item 11, which is public comment. Which again is time for comment on matters that are not on the agenda, as discussed when I described the protocol. There are members of the public who wish to address the board on matters that are not on our agenda for this evening. If so, this is the time to raise your electronic hand in the Zoom platform. Okay, I see one person who wishes to address the board. That would be Lexi Romanowski. And so if we could unmute Ms. Romanowski. So you should be unmuted now, Ms. Romanowski, and so the next 3 minutes are yours.
Great, thank you so much for having me. My name is Lex Romanowski, and I am speaking on behalf of the Carlmont Change and Culture Committee, which is a group of 30 students advocating for racial justice on our campus. I'm speaking in favor of agenda item 14.1, the Ethnic Studies Plan. But first off, we would like to thank our incredible teachers who have been working on this curriculum. I'm here alongside a group of Carlmont students who strongly believe in the following argument. Carlmont has the smallest minority population and is the least diverse school in the Sequoia Union High School District. There might not be much we can do to imminently change our school's demographics, but we have an opportunity to raise actively aware students. Though our department head has rejected the proposal, we as Carlmont students who will be benefiting from this course believe ethnic studies will make Carlmont a safer space for minorities at our school and create better global citizens of our community. Right now, our school's curriculums are not fulfilling their obligation to us as students. Our district has the responsibility to provide us with safety, understanding, and acceptance. It is the duty of our board to uphold this vital component of our education, and I, along with my fellow Carlmont students, strongly urge you to approve the ethnic studies curriculum. It would be a failure for our chosen representatives to disregard the students' right to feel safe. It would be a failure to disregard our right to feel understood, and it would be a failure to disregard our right to be accepted. Our principal, Ralph Crane, said it best, quote, "The challenge is really to get people to understand other people's perspectives. Just getting people to understand other people's point of view and where they are coming from is the biggest issue around diversity," unquote. You have an obligation to support diversity on our campuses, and that includes curriculum. Thank you for your time.
Okay, thank you. Now, again, as indicated, this ordinarily is the time for public comment on matters that are not on the agenda. Of course, consideration of the ethnic studies course proposal is on the agenda. I see another hand that is, I see no hand. So again, I would invite any comments from anybody who wishes to address the board on matters that are not on the agenda. Of course, Ms. Romanowski, your comments will be noted and in our minds when we get to item 14.1. Okay. Seeing no further items on public comment, and we have no public hearing items this evening, that brings us to item 13, our information item tonight, which is a discussion of an update on the work of the Joint Penavit Committee workflow for 2020-2021. And I believe, Dr. McAvoy, you're going to be leading us through this item.
Yes, President Weiner, members of the board, we wanted to give you a brief overview of the work that the Benefits Committee will be doing this year. We've had quite a number of discussions previously regarding the exiting of CalPERS and a look at what benefits would mean for us this coming year. We have agreement from ASME and SDTA, as well as representatives from management and confidentials and unrepresented, to participate in the Benefits Committee, and we'll also be working with, again, with Claremont Partners. I don't know whether I can I share my screen? Yes, I can share my screen. I'm excited about that. So just to give you an idea of, I can share my screen, but I can't move my screen. How do I do that? It's not working the way that oh, there we go. So when we consider an exit CalPERS, a reminder that one of the challenges we have with exiting CalPERS is that the way that the system works is that CalPERS produces or distributes its rates in about mid-June. Then from there, we have 90 days, between 60 and 90 days, to actually exit CalPERS, which involves a board resolution. And the challenge for a school district is that a lot of times the decision-making people are not around in June. If we're negotiating with SDTA, it's rare that we would be negotiating during the months of June and July. And the same thing with ASME, although there are more ASME employees around and there are more management employees around, it's very unlikely that we would be having discussions in June and July. So the goal for this year is to complete those discussions and complete identifying the criteria for exiting CalPERS before those rates are published in June, so that when those rates are published, it is very clear to us whether or not we would be exiting CalPERS. Another reminder that I would like to provide is that each group can separately exit CalPERS because they entered CalPERS separately. So there was a resolution that when ASME entered, when SDT entered, and then when unrepresented entered. Each one of those was a separate resolution. And so the board would then be developing 3 resolutions if all 3 groups were to exit CalPERS at the same time. So there's also a stipulation from CalPERS. They stipulate that if you exit, you can't come back for 5 years. And so there definitely is a risk involved in exiting CalPERS, and that would be part of the criteria that we would have to establish. So based on that, we've put together a timeline. We will be calling together the Joint Benefits Committee sometime this month or early November. We hope to validate all of the work that we did last year. We took a deep dive into the actual plans that are offered by CalPERS. The Benefits Committee, members of the Benefits Committee really learned a lot. I learned a lot about benefits and plans and different aspects of plans. And so we would need to refresh on all of that to make sure that we're very, very clear on the types of plans that we are looking for as we go out for an RFP. We hope to go out with an RFP in January with a turnaround date so that in February, we can be analyzing those potential providers. And again, we would need to be comparing those potential providers to the current CalPERS rates. But the potential providers will be providing for next year. And so that's also part of the challenge that we have, is looking at an RFP for providers when in fact we're going to be looking at current CalPERS rates and not the CalPERS rates for 2022. So in April and May, we would hopefully be negotiating the criteria and establishing the criteria for an exit from CalPERS based on what we find out from CalPERS in June, so that once those the different criteria are established, then in June, we would be either, when the rates come out, we would be ready to go to either bring a resolution to exit CalPERS or not to the board in June or the first meeting in August. We had a little more flex time this year because the rates did not come out until July. And so we had a timeline that extended through September. And that may be the case next year. We just don't know. But we just wanted to give you a brief update on the workflow for the Benefits Committee. We're excited to have board members join us in this endeavor this year. There's a lot of information. There's a lot of learning that has to happen as we analyze plans and we make decisions that are in the best interest of our employees.
Excellent. Thank you. Are there comments or questions from board members about this item? And who will be participating? Will it be Trustee Jack and Trustee Thompson? Is that right? That's been our ad hoc committee for this purpose, or will that be reconsidered?
That's who we would invite. I think the board would make the decision about who would be the 2 representatives.
Okay, very good. Well, thank you for that update. Again, I think we're now looking at going together to address our effort to save health costs in maybe a different approach than we've considered doing it before, and look forward to that collaboration. All right, if there are no further comments or questions on that, then I will move on to our first discussion item, which is item 14.1, which is consideration of the Ethnic Studies course proposal. And I see Ms. Hansen, you'll be leading this discussion.
Thank you, President Weiner. I will. I think I saw a hand go up from an attendee. Does that get addressed afterwards?
Yeah, I think what I'm going to do is hear the presentation first, then invite public comment, and then board deliberation, which is, I think, a pretty standard way that we deal with items, even when people used to do this in the form of green cards.
Back in the day. Thank you, President Weiner. So you've already heard a little bit about what you're about to hear more about this evening, the Ethnic Studies course proposal, and they are going to do an amazing job of describing what is being proposed to you tonight. And so just before I turn before I turn it over to them, I wanted to be clear with the board that this is a course proposal that is looking to replace a current graduation requirement. So currently at the sophomore year, our students, most of our students take modern European history. If this course is adopted, the proposal is that World Studies 1 and 2 would move to sophomore year. We would still have a quarter of life skills in the freshman year, but then in place of World Studies 1 and 2, which is now at the sophomore year, in place of modern European history, we would have the ethnic studies course proposal. So what you are seeing tonight has been approved unanimously by the IVPs, the principals, and all but one department represented in the social studies SAC. Just a note that each social studies department chair went back and surveyed the teachers at their school site, and then the vote, it was one vote to represent the entire department. So at a given school, even if your department did not vote in favor of the proposal, you may have, as an individual, have voted for it. And that was certainly the case going both ways. So I hope it's clear what we are asking of you tonight and what our recommendation is. I know you will let me know if it is not, but I give to you the ethnic studies course proposal team, and I believe they have screen sharing rights.
Just before we proceed, I want to be clear with respect to what we're doing tonight. This is cast as a discussion item rather than an action item. And so, I mean, you've described this as a recommendation, but I mean, since it's a discussion item, I assume that there would sort of be an opportunity for the board to discuss this and then provide such direction or guidance as we wanted. Am I unclear on the procedure?
You are in no way unclear on the procedure.
Okay, great. So then let us proceed.
All right. So this is the agenda for today, and we'll go through each piece step by step. First is our introductions.
So I'm Karen Ramroth, and I teach at Carlmont High School. I teach government and economics to 12th graders and an 11th, 12th grade elective called race, ethnicity, and immigration.
I'm Ann Olson. I teach at Menlo Atherton High School. I teach US History, AP US History, and an 11th and 12th grade elective called Gender Studies.
Hi, I'm Stephanie Cuff Alvarado. I've taught 9th grade World Studies, and I teach 12th grade Economics and Government in our Academy program.
My name is Diana Nguyen. I teach 9th grade World Studies and 10th grade Modern Euro.
My name is Melissa Diaz. I teach 10th grade Modern European History, LEP, and Modern European History, ICAP.
Hi, I'm Claire Arate-Kirby. I teach 10th grade MEH, and I also teach 11th grade US History in our Health Careers Academy.
Hello, I'm Kat Cole, founding teacher at Tide Academy, and I currently teach 9th grade Life Skills and World Studies.
Hi everyone, I'm Kayla Dice. I teach 9th grade Life Skills World Studies and 11th grade US History.
So we want to give you an overview. We are proposing 9th grade to be Life Skills Ethnic Studies and 10th grade to be World Studies. Now we understand that not all 9th graders will take ethnic studies, but that is something we would like for all 9th graders to take. Now, 10th grade being World Studies doesn't mean that Euro goes away. We were thinking that, world is a part, Euro is part of the world. So don't think it as like an erasure or a replace or like taking away that entire continent. Of course, Euro would be a part of world as well as Africa and Latin America and Asia. Now, the district curriculum that we will create is meant to be a resource trove that establishes what ethnic studies is so that we're all on the same page, but also respecting the differences at each school site. Think about it as like a box of inspiration where like, ooh, I want to teach that. I want to learn that. And finally, it's important to understand that this organizing effort has come from teachers, alumni, various stakeholders, and community members across all the school sites, not just one person marching in that we want ethnic studies. It's really a collaborative and community effort.
All right, hello everybody. We thought it would be important to start with a discussion of what is ethnic studies, since not everyone may have taken an ethnic studies course before. So first and foremost, it's a rich and academic field that very much dives into the study of power. It closely relates to, or it closely examines how power relates to race, ethnicity, religion, nationality, gender, sexual orientation. And so we see is it's an exploration of that power, but through counter narratives, and it really emphasizes the role of intersectionality. We want to highlight the complex nature of our identities and the systems in which our identities exist. Now, ethnic studies in terms of content spans across locations that connect and compare global, national, and local events. It's important to know that at the heart of it, ethnic studies is for and by the people it intends to discuss. So it is incredibly community oriented. As such, it tends to look a little bit different depending on where it is taught. It really emphasizes what's going on in the local area. We also thought it would be important to clarify what ethnic studies is by looking at what ethnic studies is not. There's always sort of a natural tension within discussions of what's angles to take in exploring ethnic studies. So ethnic studies versus third world studies. And we see that there's multiple approaches, but primarily ethnic studies is not area studies. Just because something has occurred outside of the Western world does not make it fall under ethnic studies. It tends to focus more specifically on the United States, but looking at how the US does not exist within a vacuum. We are connected to the global world, and our experiences of our identities change depending where we are and what aspects of our identities we bring out. It's also not just a course study about individual identity. It goes much further than that. It really emphasizes the important skills of analysis, critical reading, and really important skills of academic discourse. How do I talk about these issues that are going on all around us? And something that's very important for us to emphasize is that this is not just an exploration of oppression. Ethnic studies is an incredibly empowering discipline, one that I can speak to in that I know I'm an alumni from Sequoia, and I love Sequoia High School with all my heart, and it was there where I discovered my love of learning. And in college, because of the conversations I had with my incredible teachers that would like spend their lunch with me talking, I knew to seek out these questions that were answered by ethnic studies. So one of my degrees is in ethnic studies, and I found it to be it's hard to describe the incredible feeling of the first time you see your complex identity on paper inside of a classroom. When you are told your history is an actual history, that it is not a random occurrence that just happened to you as an individual, but that it is a part of a larger system and a larger pattern. And additionally, I can speak to how empowering it was in that I ended up pursuing 2 degrees, and I found that my ethnic studies degree made me a far more competitive political science major as well. And so these skills that we get from having the conversation about these incredibly important and relevant topics are meant to empower and to teach people about what you can do within your own community. Very much the feelings I have of wanting to be here today to advocate for our students tonight. I think I'll use that as sort of our transition to talk about more about why ethnic studies is important. And I'll pass this on to Karen so we can see that this is not just a singular experience, but that this is a larger pattern that we have well-documented research on.
So the mission statement for the district, we feel that ethnic studies really fits into that very well. It helps our school sites to come closer to achieving that mission, to engage and prepare all of our students to excel in a global society. There have been many studies that have come out from different organizations, different universities, studying different students, studying different outcomes. And many of them show us the benefits of taking an ethnic studies course. Things like higher class attendance rates, higher GPAs, more credits earned, higher graduation rates in college and in high school. And so we see the benefit of a course like this, and we want to bring that benefit to the students in our district. We also feel that teaching students to excel in a global society means expanding some of our curriculum and really telling some of those untold stories that are left out, similar to what Stephanie was referring to. And also importantly, in conjunction with what Stephanie was talking about, it really, by having the course in 9th grade, it really sets the stage as a foundational piece for Sequoia Union High School District's social studies departments and our students to start to get that language, to be able to communicate with each other, to be able to name the things that they already know are happening, but to be able to speak it and name it and identify it and share about it. And to really be able to start to see each other as they come from different cities, different middle schools. Some of our students they've moved here to start their high school career. So it really is a community building experience as well, which gives them the ability to speak to one another and to have that language to really communicate across different races, different genders, different classes, different religions, etc. One of the sort of most common documents that really talks about how ethnic studies helps students was published actually quite a while ago, but you see it come up in a lot of different publications and different times where people are talking about the benefits of ethnic studies. And it's a study published by Dr. Christine Sleeter. She talks about how having a well-designed ethnic studies course can have positive academic and social outcomes for students. She also talks about that, and this was brought up earlier in the presentation as well, about being able to teach it somewhat differently depending on who's in the class, what experiences they bring. Students are really seen as partners in knowledge in an ethnic studies course. She also found in her study that students of color and white students have been found to benefit, again, academically and socially from taking ethnic studies courses. Another thing that she found is that sometimes the knock on ethnic studies is it's too much, it's too touchy-feely, it's kind of just talking about how we feel about things. Ethnic studies courses are actually very academically rigorous, of course, with structured scaffolds and supports. And the last critique that she really addresses in her study that I think is important is sometimes people will view an ethnic studies course as a course that seeks to divide or to bring up things, negative things about society. And what she finds in her study is that anything that is going on that is negative or any differences that students are experiencing, us talking about them doesn't make them suddenly realize, oh, wow, racism exists. So these are things that our students already know and are living and are experiencing. And ethnic studies, rather than being divisive, actually helps students come together across those differences. And they tend to walk away really having a more clear picture of history, of democracy, and of society. So as I said earlier, I do have the opportunity to teach an elective version of this course. I reached out to some of my students who had taken the course in past years, some of whom are here tonight actually, and I'm hoping that you will get a chance to hear from them later. But these were some of the things that they said when I asked them to speak about their experience in the course. I basically just said, could you say something about what you got out of the course? And I'm not going to read these word for word to you, but some of the things that they highlight are that it helped them with their career choices. It gave them the language to explain and discuss current topics regarding race and ethnicity. It helped them with their communication skills, not just about race and ethnicity, but just in general. They talked about being able to hear those unheard stories from different groups of people that are oftentimes left out of mainstream curriculum. They talked about being given a safe space to be able to explore these issues, their identities, and the issues that they were facing in their communities. And they talked about, as has been brought up several times, about the importance of representation and seeing themselves in the curriculum, as well as seeing their peers in the curriculum. So sometimes it wasn't going to be about them and their identity, but learning about the experiences and stories and backgrounds and rich histories of their peers as well.
So what we want students to take away are, our goals are the skills we want students to take away. The first is to research and read a variety of sources. So often I get students who are like, Mixed D, I saw something on TikTok or Instagram and I learned about this history that I didn't learn in class. So, you know, to bring in social media, to bring in books, of course, that's not going away, music, art, literature, and multimedia. Sharing how these social media platforms or any platform can give voice to students who might not have been able to have a platform before, and also battling misinformation and the spread of, you can post anything anytime. Also, as mentioned by Karen and Stephanie, speaking and listening, how to talk about race, how to verbalize the thoughts that are in the back of our head, but you haven't necessarily heard it in a community setting where people look different from you, with people you don't interact with. And really, the goal of it is to just feel less lonely, to know that you're not experiencing this alone. You are an individual, but understanding how history plays a role in your life and affects how you experience it. Analyzing and critical thinking, thinking about whose voice is missing, who has power, how is power created and taken, and that it shouldn't be just for one set of population, but that changes throughout time. Connecting it to the local, what is happening in our schools, in our classrooms, the hyperlocal, as well as a national, global, and talking across those contexts. We want this to be relevant. Finally, building community to identify areas of change. We can't emphasize enough, as we're unpacking power, how we want students to be empowered with their education and to go out and make a change. Pillars are what grounds our content. So things that we're thinking about and what we should bring into the classroom. This is grassroots effort, recognizing what happens in our local and school community and what we can have impact over when things just seem out of our control. Looking at anti-racism and how to be an anti-racist, not just acknowledge it, but how to actively dismantle these systems. Intersectionality, which is a term which means that, how do multiple your identities, how does your complex identity affect the world around you? And what is its relationship to power? How can you have an oppressed identity and a privileged identity? And how do you make sense of that? And finally, grappling with difficult discussions, talking about indigeneity and decolonization, questions that we might not have the answer to, but grappling with, and amending history or injustice and histories. And it's okay to not have an answer, but we should have a chance to talk about this. Now, our units are essentially the topics that every course should have. And this is not a prescribed list. We've poured through syllabus across, the Bay Area, and notice these key themes. So teachers, please pick and pull what you like. And we generally see that, this might be named differently, but all teachers are hitting on these points. And teachers should play to their strengths and the student population they serve. So an intro would look like, how did ethnic studies come to be? What is it about? What are misconceptions about it? How did the MA petition launch this? What happened at SF State? Identity can incorporate religion, gender, sexuality, race, etc. And narrative is really important in understanding, what do people say about you? Which voices get heard, and how do you make a voice for yourself, or what stories do you want to be told, and analyzing that. Now, when talking about the second element is migration and movement, and this is not just about displacement, although we will talk about that as well. But migration and movement can look something like, how did a Vietnamese community come to San Jose, California? We often talk about immigrant communities as assimilating, but not necessarily talking about how ethnic communities have changed the world around them, how they have been a place of support for each other, how they have built community. And third, systems of power, analyzing, looking at the histories, and that, of course, there's individual action, but how has history shaped your own experience in unpacking healthcare or education, et cetera, and see where students fit in with that. And finally, of course, emphasizing how we want students to feel empowered, looking at power movements, what has worked, transformation and change. We'd love the capsule to be a project in which ninth graders can share what research they have or what changes they want to see in the community. We want to invite admin and teachers to listen to them. What do they want to see happening and why? How are they connecting that to what we've learned in class?
So we wanted to provide some context and remind or inform everyone about the history of ethnic studies in our district. 4 years ago, teachers and admin got together, and there was a lot of effort and energy put into introducing an ethnic studies elective course. Carlmont the next year was able to use that same course proposal to introduce an ethnic studies elective at Carlmont. We also know that EPAA currently teaches race and immigration in their 9th grade year. And when the founding teachers were hired at Tide Academy, I worked on a course proposal for 9th grade social studies along with other teachers and consultants and admin called Cross-Cultural Perspectives. And I introduced that course at the time to the social studies SAC, and there was a lot of interest in it across the district from multiple school sites. However, it wasn't really the right fit at the time because it was designed with Tide specifically in mind and under the constraints that applied to Tide. And it was also designed to replace world studies rather than to work together with world studies. And so that course was not adopted, but there was a lot of interest. And now I think our course proposal that we're presenting today is in a place where it's really going to accommodate the needs of each site. And will be something that will work for all of the sites across our district. We also want to acknowledge that US history teachers incorporate these lenses as well. And so we don't want to say that this learning isn't happening elsewhere, but the ethnic studies course that we're proposing will be unique in the units and topics that will be discussed. And here on the screen, you can see just some examples of mini lessons that we already have in our arsenal as teachers. This was a very quick brainstorm that we did just to put up some ideas and share some resources. So you can only imagine when more teachers get together from across the district, how many rich resources we'll be able to share with each other to create, like Diana said earlier, a treasure trove of lesson plans and curricular resources. We also wanted to provide context in terms of how our district compares to other districts around us. And so we did some research, and it was actually very eye-opening to look at the facts and to realize that we are the only high school district in our area that requires all students to take modern European history as a graduation requirement. As you could see, San Mateo Union provides students a choice between world history or European history. And Palo Alto, Half Moon Bay, Mountain View, Los Altos, they all require world history as their graduation requirement. A couple of these districts also have contemporary world studies or freshman social studies in the 9th grade year. And I know that at least in San Mateo, that course is an ethnic studies course. And just to note that all of these districts listed here, also none of them require European history. They require world history. And the majority of these districts offer ethnic studies courses. Also want to point out that the Santa Clara County Board of Education approved a resolution just this past June announcing their commitment to the expansion of ethnic studies curricula in Santa Clara County.
So we put together a list of the different school sites in our school district and the current history department courses and course offerings that they propose. So taking a look at this, we can really see that the 9th grade year is pretty much the only year in which there is the uniform offering of life skills and world studies. Beyond that, schools have different offerings as far as APs, they have different electives that are happening. So we really do think that the 9th grade year is the ideal time and grade level for this to be implemented in, not only because it is the most convenient across sites, but also for the same reasons that Karen and Diana talked about earlier, where this is where students are meeting each other for the first time. This is the excellent time that we think these conversations should be happening, that would happen with ethnic studies. So this is the proposed history courses where students would be taking life skills for the first quarter and ethnic studies for the rest of the freshman year. We then would like to propose that world studies, including Euro, the integration of the two, be the 10th grade course. We know that some sites offer APs in the sophomore year, and we'd like to continue to have those sites offer whichever AP they think is the best fit for their student body. So as has been mentioned many times before, we do believe that ethnic studies could be an amazing toolkit for teachers to pull from. And in particular, we would really want this to come from the sites. So what does the student body look like at the different schools? What is the history of the school, of the area that they're representing? So as a group, we kind of quickly brainstormed what are some lessons or focuses that we think would particularly benefit each of our sites. This is not comprehensive, but we really think that ethnic studies is an amazing opportunity to target and speak to the students that we serve.
So there are a few concerns and potential challenges that we would like to address. And the first is the most important. The last thing that we want to do is make students feel like the curriculum is tokenizing or objectifying or intellectualizing their lived experiences. And to prevent this, teachers really need training. And Kayla is going to talk about this later in the presentation, but learning how and understanding how to talk about race in the classroom, reflecting on our own personal identities and the identities that we bring to the classroom. Students also really need to see themselves in the curriculum in really powerful, positive, and complicated ways. And we've hit on this many times throughout this presentation, but we really want to emphasize that the curriculum that we ideally would like to see is one that focuses a lot on resistance, on resilience, and reimagining our futures. There's also the concern that students might be too young for the content that we're going to be discussing. And many teachers are present here and can attest to the immense amount of maturity that even freshmen bring to the classroom when talking about really challenging things. And as has been mentioned before, EPAA has a 9th grade course on race and immigration where they talk about the Arizona Ethnic Studies Band and issues that are really challenging to talk about, but kids really want to talk about them. They're at an age where they're noticing all the inequities in society and questioning things, and it would do them a disservice if we aren't providing them the space to talk about this or the language to help them understand the world around them. There's also the concern that teachers might be attached to their curriculum, specifically the modern European history curriculum, and they might feel forced to teach ethnic studies. But it's important to note that teachers have been putting in the work and are willing to put in the work. This resolution passed the SAC, and we must trust that department chairs will place teachers ultimately where they will be doing the best work that they can for their students. There's also the concern that the timing might be too fast to try to implement for next year. And this is, a pretty real concern, but at the same time, teachers have been pushing for this and students have been pushing for this and community members have been pushing for this for quite some time. And it's impossible for the first year of ethnic studies to be 100% perfect. And teachers are willing to put in the work and make it happen and make the changes that are necessary and put our best foot forward. The question on who will draft the curriculum for the district, it's really important to make sure that everyone understands that the curriculum has not yet been decided. This is just a proposal, and teachers will apply to be a part of the coalition to create the curriculum. And as Bonnie has mentioned to us, that we expect a wide range of students to teachers to apply, and there's going to be a lot of excitement. So we're going to have a very clear rubric about to make sure that we have a solid coalition that represents all the sites. So 1 to 2 teachers per site will be chosen to create the curriculum in the 2nd and 3rd quarter. The curriculum team will be consulting with community stakeholders, and a few examples of that is that we really want to make sure that the Black student unions across the school sites are being consulted. The coalition of alumni and community members that have been working and collaborating with us on the proposal will also be consulted with. And on that note, it's really important for all of us to understand that ethnic studies should really actively center the voices of Black people, Indigenous people, and people of color. And obviously ethnic studies is for all students, and Karen has talked about the immense amount of impact that this course could have on all students, regardless of their identities and backgrounds. But it's just important to be mindful that this course is being proposed with the context of the erasure of the histories of Black, Indigenous, and people of color by requiring the modern European history course for so long. And the question of what textbook will be adopted, for this question, we are, as a team, we're very open and flexible when it comes to adopting the textbook, because we recognize that there has already been so much work done around adopting textbooks for social studies last year. We're aware of the Williams Act. So we sort of want to propose a few suggestions. So the most frequently used text in ethnic studies is A Different Mirror by Dr. Ronald Takaki, which is the text that a couple districts around the peninsula use. There's also an interest and a willingness for teachers to create a course reader with primary sources and scaffolded theory. And this would really closely mirror the ways that college level courses are taught. And it would really prepare students for that rigor, obviously with scaffolds and supports. And we could also grab excerpts from the existing 9th grade textbook or other textbooks such as the Pearson. Pearson has a textbook about racial and ethnic groups, but just want to reiterate that we're very flexible and open about the textbook issue. And then, of course, it's important, this has been a teacher-led initiative, and in the back of our minds always is, how is this going to work in the classroom? What are situations that might arise in the classroom? And, it's important to know that, students, we understand the fear that, ethnic studies, you talk about really personal things, you talk about your identity, and there might be an unsafe environment in some cases. And for this question, we really want to emphasize the importance of being proactive and creating brave spaces and creating norms in the classroom and having routines that we come back to throughout, such as restorative justice circles and weekly socioeconomic, emotional check-ins, mindfulness practice, all these things that teachers already do in the classroom. And as social studies teachers, we already discuss really challenging topics, and we all feel that with the right amount of training and bringing in our own expertise, we'll be able to effectively create safe spaces for students. And then also the concern that conservative students might feel ostracized from the class. And for this, we really want to emphasize the importance of obviously providing students with just facts and evidence. And every social studies teacher is really well versed in the skills of teaching students sourcing and assessing bias and reliability, contextualization, all these things. So we really feel prepared to make sure that students are getting the information that is historically accurate and having appropriate discussions. The project that Diana mentioned can really focus on local community and schools and empowering students to be active and have opinions about localities. And we also want to note that it's important to validate the feelings and emotions of students and emphasize, the importance of students' willingness to speak against the grain. Like, that's really valuable, but also balancing the fine line between addressing really harmful beliefs that directly harm students in the classroom. So we, as social studies teachers, feel relatively equipped to balance this line as we discuss these challenging topics in our classrooms every day.
Wonderful. So like Melissa said, we do feel relatively equipped. This is something we're not completely unaware of how to handle in our classroom. We've been working as social studies teachers for a long time, having these difficult conversations and navigating these topics. But as you can tell, I'm sure by this point in the presentation, ethnic studies carries a certain weight, and we recognize that, and we hope that the district would be supportive of providing a couple different aspects of support and trainings for teachers who are going to be teaching this. So things like professional development. I've listed a couple of things here that you can see that we had the idea for, things like navigating difficult conversations. We've also worked with UC Berkeley History Social Studies Project before in this district, and even some members of this team on just ethnic studies trainings. Also, Facing History and Ourselves has great training on intersectionality, on genocide, on race and ethnicity. So there's definitely resources out there that we would love to engage with. Another good point to make on professional development is we thought it would be useful for prospective and future ethnic studies teachers to take a community college class, on ethnic studies, and really be able to bring that knowledge back to the teams, their site teams, and share, their experience and the resources that they get from taking that course. Also offering PD for both the 9th grade ethnic studies teachers and the 10th grade, now world studies teachers would be so, so important to make both grade levels feel supported and valued in this transition. And finally, one last point to make on professional development would be that providing mini versions of ethnic studies to all 9th grade teachers across all disciplines at things like June PD or August Teacher Orientation Week would really help support our district in meeting this goal, keeping in mind that ethnic studies is not a solution, it's one part of the solution. And so giving all teachers in our district the tools they need to have these conversations in their specific disciplines would be really useful. Further support we have thought of would be financial compensation and valuing this work. And obviously collaborating with the Equity and Diversity Council would be really important as well. Making sure that the curriculum building group is selected from a rubric created by the council so that we can have a great representation and a strong staff creating this curriculum. And also, of course, the district providing support for teachers and admin if and when parents and students push back or have questions, and helps us explain the importance of this course and its relevance in our students' lives. We put together an estimated hours of professional development for ethnic studies. So you can see the vision, which consisted of researching, creating the course outline, and attending conferences. You can see the estimates there, about 20 hours per person. And then once we get to school site development, actually creating the materials, you can see we're estimating about 100 hours or so per person. And then professional development, actually continuing this education and making it constantly reimagined and relevant again to our students' lives. We estimate that at about 40 hours per person.
All right, I want to thank you all for listening to the sustained presentation and give you hope that we are getting toward the end, but there are a few really important points that we want to bring to your attention before we turn it over to you for questions. And the first is an understanding that there are limitations to ethnic studies, and there are things that ethnic studies is not going to solve, and that our proposal is not going to solve. And I think it's really important that we call these out and we identify these, and this list has been compiled through collaboration throughout all of the sites in the district, talking with administration at our site level and at the district level, communicating with department heads. And one thing that we know that is at the forefront of a lot of administrator and teacher minds is that there are students in 9th grade who take support classes and therefore would not be receiving a social studies class in 9th grade. And we think that any number of students who miss ethnic studies is too big. We think that every 9th grader should be afforded the opportunity to take ethnic studies, which is why we're really petitioning and proposing that this become a graduation requirement. However, when talking about moving forward with an ethnic studies course or with this proposal, the current structure of support students, this proposal isn't going to solve, and we believe shouldn't be a reason to delay this proposal. Already 9th grade students are not receiving that world studies course. So the question that we would pose is, why is it okay for any 9th grader to miss social studies, period, which has been happening? And so we understand that there are some structural obstacles to work through as we reimagine the social studies experience for students in our district. We also acknowledge that at this moment in time, there may not be fully equipped and prepared students or teachers to teach an ethnic studies course. We also understand that at all of our sites, we don't necessarily have teachers that represent and reflect the identities of the students who will be in the room. But we think that the adoption of ethnic studies is an opportunity to rethink hiring practices, to make sure that when we are building our coalition of teachers at our sites, that we have our students' identities in mind and we're able to represent for our students the possibility of becoming an educator, which is something that I know that everybody in the Zoom room really believes in. Otherwise, we wouldn't be here right now. And I think that another really important point is that ethnic studies is not the end to any of these discussions on equity or diversity or transforming our social studies curriculum and the social studies experience for students in our district, but instead it's one step. And we acknowledge that there are centuries of generational trauma and violence and harm that have been done that are impacting the students in our district on a day-to-day basis. And we know that ethnic studies is not the end to solving that or to fixing that, But instead, what we've seen through like this discussion that has really snowballed since early June when these conversations started is that it's an opportunity to be seen, to bring more people to the table, to have identities that haven't yet been addressed in school curricula be reflected in the core curriculum with complex and complicated narratives and not just a single track story. And so we think all of these things are really important. There are still many opportunities to improve experiences when it comes to equity and diversity on our school sites. And we believe that ethnic studies is not the end of that, but it's a really, really great place to start. And it's a great place to put what the district believes in when it comes to equity and diversity into action and really transform the experiences of all students by making this a graduation requirement in our district. So we really like, and this is kind of what I just touched on, we like this quote that ethnic studies is a single step in a movement to reframing our curriculum. As it's been said earlier by my amazing colleagues, ethnic studies will transform the way that students experience the rest of their courses throughout their high school experience because we're changing the lens at which they look at the past and the present and different relationships of power. I think it's also really, really important to acknowledge that this group of teachers wouldn't have been brought together had it not been the work for the broader Sequoia Union High School District community. Huge shout out has to go out to all of the alumni and current students in our district who first did the work to organize for ethnic studies in our district. As you may be aware, three MA alumni, Mara Caviaro, Ella Masan, and Alex Chang, who I think are all viewing in right now, created a change.org petition over the summer that received over 2,300 signatures calling for a graduation requirement of an ethnic studies course, which is massive. And it's important to acknowledge that at the Sequoia Union High School District, we've given our current students and our alumni this baseline for how to use inquiry, how to use the skills that they take in school. And then they took that to college with them, are seeking ethnic studies degrees, and are using that to empower themselves to make changes in their district from when they went to high school, which I think is incredibly powerful. There are alumni groups throughout the district that have been working with each other and talking with each other throughout this summer in order to get to where we are today. And I think it's really important to acknowledge that at a time when the world and this country is so divided, ethnic studies has brought us together. We have teachers from all of the different sites who have been communicating throughout the entire summer, and we would have never had this opportunity to work together had it not been for this course proposal. And it's incredibly heartwarming to see students and alumni throughout all of our comprehensive sites working together and coming together at a time where the world is so incredibly divisive. And I think that if a course proposal can bring people together in this way, this course could like really do magical things, not just for our individual students, but for our district as a whole. And we're all really excited about the possibility of what this could look like and how this could transform the educational experience at Sequoia Union High School District. With that, this concludes kind of our formal presentation, and we know that the way that board meetings typically work is that there may be some questions or some responses, and so at this point we want to turn it back over to the board for any questions or responses that you may have.
Thank you very much for the presentation. The way I'd like to proceed this evening first is to invite comment from the public before the board begins its deliberations, which of course can include any questions that board members may have. So if there's anybody who'd like to address the board on this matter, please so indicate at this point by raising your blue Zoom hand. I'd like to make sure I know how many we have so we can manage the time. Okay, I see, well, I'm going to give it a minute because I think we're going to have to adjust the amount of time that we allocate to individual speakers. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Okay. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. All right, we have 12 people who've indicated that they'd like to address the board. What I propose to do with the board's approval is to give everybody 2 minutes, but not cut off any speakers so that we can hear everybody. So let's go ahead and plan to allocate 25 minutes to comment. Is there a motion to allocate 25 minutes to public comment on this issue?
I motion.
Is there a second? Chris says yes, and so Ms. Stevenson, Shawnice, you're number 12 on the list, and so we'll go down the list, but we'll have 2 minutes per speaker in order to allow time for everybody. So the first speaker on the list is identified on my screen only as Barash, and so if we could unmute Barash, you should be allowed to speak.
Hi, can you hear me?
I can. We can.
Hi, my name is Rachel Modena Barish, and I'm a mother of 4, and 2 of which are MA students. I'm very proud to be a part of this amazing community that works to change the status quo. Knowing that so many of our students, teachers, administrators, and community members want a better world that is based on understanding and accepting differences gives me immense hope, and I'm grateful to be a part of this endeavor. I happily volunteer as a community stakeholder to be a member of the coalition creating the curriculum. I urge that the board not base the curriculum on the ESMC second field review. Gavin Newsom vetoed the bill mandating the ethnic studies graduation because the ESMC was so problematic and riddled with divisiveness. We would like an ethnic studies curriculum that is safe and inclusive and not divisive. We further urge a full public review and discussion and time to get this right. Rushing this does not make a lot of sense. We need to have a fully public review and discussion about the curriculum. And we need, especially if all freshmen are going to be taking this course, and make sure that none are marginalized and all feel safe. And I urge again that we do not adopt a flawed ESMC platform as the basis for this endeavor. And I thank you so very much for your time.
Thank you. The next person I'd like to unmute or ask staff to unmute is Mara Caballero, to be followed then by Devin Prudy.
Hi, can you hear me okay?
Indeed, yes, you sound great.
Thank you so much for your time. First of all, I'll try and keep this quick and concise. My name is Mara Marquez Cavallaro. I graduated from MA in 2018 and I'm now a junior at Brown, where I'm majoring in ethnic studies with a focus on education. And now when people ask me why I chose that major, I always answer to compensate for what was missing from my high school experience. MA's prioritization of Eurocentric curricula and perspectives and lack of curricular representation of people of color led me personally to internalize the notion that Latinx histories weren't even worth being taught. I did not see myself in history textbooks, in the authors we read in English, or in discussion about contemporary society and structures. It wasn't until I got to college and met peers who had taken ethnic studies that I realized schools were offering ethnic studies and mine just didn't. Now, as someone who was only exposed to ethnic studies in college, I think the sooner ethnic studies pedagogy and curricula are introduced, the better. Ethnic studies is a foundational anti-racist course that works to inform all future history courses. I went through 4 years of high school without ever having a lecture or discussion on white privilege, on settler colonialism, without ever explicitly linking structures of oppression in the past to structures of oppression in the present. Ethnic studies in the 9th grade provides that critical definitional and foundational understanding that will inform all other history classes. Why wait to teach actively anti-racist curricula that teaches students how to dismantle structures of oppression? We need ethnic studies as soon as possible. It is long overdue. And now quickly, from an academic standpoint, it is the most rigorous class I've ever taken. It develops critical thinking and engages interdisciplinary theory. It has been beneficial in all the other college courses I've taken. From a moral standpoint, students of color deserve to see themselves represented in curriculum. I deserve to have my history valued in a classroom. This district owes an educational debt to all students of color that have passed through it, and it is our moral obligation to institute ethnic studies as a mandatory graduation requirement.
Thank you, Ms. Caballero. Next would be Devin Prudy. You should be permitted, and then Ms. Amy Koo.
Hi, thank you. I'm the parent of 2 MA students, and I support the broad aims of this proposal. However, I have some concerns about the implementation. What assurances can you give anxious parents and families that this curriculum will not promote anti-Semitism, either overtly or covertly? As I'm sure you know, anti-Semitic hate crimes rose by 12% in 2019. Anti-Semitism is the fastest growing classification of hate crime in California, and last year saw the most anti-Semitic incidents in the United States since at least 1979, according to the Anti-Defamation League. Our family had firsthand experience of this in freshman world history, where class materials were unknowingly taken from overtly anti-Semitic groups that present themselves as neutral resources. Fortunately, we had a great response from the teacher who was very receptive to our feedback and corrected the curriculum and did a wonderful job. So it turned out good for us in that case, but the problematic material was still presented in the classroom. How will you prevent these types of problems going forward? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Prudy. Amy Koo, colleague of ours from another one of our partner school districts, followed by Marianne Moshiti.
Hello. Can you hear me?
You are live. You are live, Amy.
Okay. Hi. I appreciate you giving me a chance to speak today. I'm Amy Koo, and I'm the Vice President of the Belmont Redwood Shores School Board. First off, I wanted to appreciate everyone's efforts to put this proposal together. It's been amazing. Since the beginning of the year, I'm also the Vice President of the API School Board Members Association, and we've been very actively involved in the ethnic studies model curriculum. From the standpoint that we want to ensure that the Asian American Pacific Islander unit is inclusive. So I'm very well aware of the benefits of having ethnic studies as a requirement because it's so important, especially at this time of xenophobic acts and police brutality and just all the racism that's out there. It's very much needed, so that all children can understand, all students can understand the contributions of people different from themselves, as well as the struggles that they've had being American and learning the race skills in order to develop relationships and eventually dismantle systemic racism. I really was disappointed when the governor vetoed AB 331, which would have required high school, had a required high school graduation requirement for ethnic studies. But this is an example of how a grassroots effort can have a requirement be instituted at the local level without a state mandate. And one final thing, I encourage you as you consider curriculum, that even if different high schools have different school populations, do make sure that all the different groups are represented. And in particular, for the AAPIs, there is a need to teach the pan-ethnic lesson, and that is Asian Americans are not a monolithic group. They consist of many different ethnic groups within the Asian American umbrella. And we all need to understand that and also understand the model minority myth. Thank you.
Thank you, Amy. Ms. I think it's Ms. Moshidi should be authorized unmuted, and then I think Mr. Fisher will be next, Alan Fisher.
Hi, my name is Marjan Moshiri. There was a typo, sorry.
It's okay, my bad. It says Moshiri.
Yeah,
hello, welcome.
And I'm a Carmont alumni. I graduated in 2018, and I'm currently at Chapman University studying sociology with an emphasis in social work. The reason I have this major is because of Ms. Ramroth and the ethnic studies class that I took my senior year of high school that was created by one of my peers. There is no way that I would find something that is so relatable to life, especially in this day and age, without this course. And I think it's vital that everyone be exposed to it. And I think doing it freshman year is the perfect way because people are coming from different backgrounds and are coming to meet new people, and there needs to be a way to learn things that are actually occurring in this world instead of things that happened hundreds of years ago. Because while those are important, I feel like what's happening today is also very important, and it's not being focused on in classes except for a current news assignment or something like that. I think having freshmen take this course would be so beneficial because people don't know what this is unless they are able to take an ethnic studies class as an elective. And that's truly, truly an issue because if we don't know what this is, like, how are we supposed to collaborate with our peers that come from different backgrounds? I think that if it was not for this course, I would not know so many of the important things I know today, and I would not be on a board trying to make ethnic studies a minor at my institution. I know that it clearly impacted my life and would impact a lot of others because they do not have the same opportunities to learn and look without being guided in that direction. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Moshiri. And if you see Professor Campbell, President Campbell, please say hello to him. He was my international law professor. Mr. Fisher, Alan Fisher, to be followed by Rick Spall.
Hello, you can hear me?
Yes, yes, indeed.
Good. I'm a parent of an MA alum, and I understand and value the idea that an ethnic studies curriculum is meant to promote understanding and mutual respect among the different groups who constitute our community. But I'm very concerned about the way in which this curriculum was constructed. It has anti-Semitic underpinnings. It's written by a group with heavy ideology and heavy jargon, which you can see in the curriculum, which was taken from the curriculum that the governor had just vetoed. The underlying principles are taken from a book called Education at War, which says it all. We were told that this is to bring us together, but if education is a war, it's meant to divide us. We're told it's supposed to be presenting students with the ability to form complex narratives, but it seems to be divided into good guys and bad guys. There's a diaspora, there's marginalized communities and genocide. Now, I just want to point out that all of that, I'm part of a Jewish diaspora that was marginalized for generations. My community was subjected to genocide. My grandmother was the only survivor of 14 siblings. And while World War II is a long time ago in the eyes of our students, somewhere just after the collapse of the Roman Empire, I think, it is recent, and it's as recent as our world today. It's as recent as Charlottesville. The Jews will not replace us, as the neo-Nazis were chanting there. It's as right back here in Redwood City. My synagogue, Beth Jacob, was torched in a still unsolved hate crime in 1979. And I am very concerned that saying Jews have white privilege and therefore can't be discussed says that we don't count. And not worth studying, not worth thinking about, we're just whites.
Thank you, Mr. Fisher. Next will be Rick Spall, to be followed by Dory Johnston.
Hi, actually, this is Rana Spall, and I'm using my husband's iPad. And I am a community member, a social studies teacher, a parent, and a grandparent in the community. And I have studied the original draft of the ethnic studies model curriculum and the one that was put out this in August. And I did hear some of the themes spoken about by some of the presenters. And I want to say that while ethnic studies is a worthwhile study, it looks like these two drafts were based on the idea of critical ethnic studies, which seems to have more of a political bent. Again, Mr. Fisher talked about education at war. I read some of the activities in a lot of detail. I thought that this, this particular draft that was just vetoed by Governor Newsom talked exactly the words that were echoed by one of your students: white colonization. It promotes victimization. It promotes impression. Instead of appreciating other cultures, it's making our children think that they were victims. And there is also an anti-Semitic bent. I'm talking about the draft that he just vetoed. And I think to start as a teacher with not giving this, the teachers a whole lot of curriculum, they could fall back on this draft that is so flawed. And I really recommend, for the betterment of your students, you wait and you adopt something that is appropriate and inclusive for all the students. Thank
you, Ms. Spalley. Now, Ms. Johnston is unmuted to be followed by Ella Misson.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Indeed, we can.
Thank you. My name is Dory Johnston. I have 3 kids, and our family lives in the Sequoia High School district, where my daughter will be attending Sequoia High School next year. I want to thank all the presenters for the amazing presentation. If I wasn't convinced before, which I was, I can see how crucial and valuable an ethnic studies class is for our high school students, and I support it wholeheartedly. My concern, similar to a few of the people before me, is the particular ethnic studies curriculum being proposed. I followed closely what happened recently, and Governor Gavin Newsom didn't veto the recent bill because he opposes ethnic studies. He did it because the particular ethnic studies curriculum being proposed is highly politicized and ideological, and will no doubt make some students feel marginalized, including my children. And so I'm just asking for something this public and controversial. I asked the board to make sure that the community feels it was given sufficient notice and time to discuss and evaluate the curriculum, not whether there should be an ethnic studies curriculum, which of course there should be, but just the specifics of the curriculum. So again, I just think the board absolutely needs to make this curriculum widely available to the Sequoia Union community for evaluation and discussion before voting on it in a single session. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Ms. Johnston. And again, my understanding is we will not be adopting a requirement tonight. This is a discussion item. So Ms. Misson is authorized to speak, to be followed by Ms. Stevenson.
Hi, everyone. My name is Ella Misson, and I graduated from Menlo Atherton High School in 2018. I'm now a junior at Tufts University. And after taking multiple ethnic studies courses at Tufts, I have recognized many fundamental gaps in my high school education that I would like to address. First, in high school, I learned about racism as if it was a thing of the past, ending with the 13th Amendment, Brown versus Board of Education, and the legal termination of Jim Crow. However, I did not learn that racism is still deeply ingrained in all of our institutions today. I did not learn about modern racial residential and school segregation, police brutality, mass incarceration, prison labor, and gaps in healthcare, income, and educational opportunity between white people and people of color. In high school, I was not actually taught what race meant or what ethnicity meant. I was never told that race is socially constructed. I was not told that race is not biological or not a culture. In high school, aside from learning about a few key leaders such as Martin Luther King Jr. and Rosa Parks, I did not learn about the accomplishments of Black activists, politicians, authors, academics, doctors, both past or present, but I did learn about many of the accomplishments of white people. In high school, I never once felt uncomfortable in a history class. My whiteness was never questioned. My role in white supremacy was never questioned. My privilege was never questioned. I was never taught that I had implicit biases, and I was not taught what I had to do and what work it would take to be actively anti-racist. And so I strongly support an ethnic studies course because I truly believe that all students deserve to and need to learn about the real history of this country, the continued oppression of people of color in the United States, the narratives and accomplishments of people of color, the ways in which one's own identity may contribute to white supremacy, and the ways in which one can become actively anti-racist. I also want to really quickly comment that I am a Jewish American student, and I think that ethnic studies is extremely important. Learning about other oppressed groups does not minimize the reality of oppression of Jewish people in America. And in reality, an ethnic studies course will allow students to explore their Jewish identity in a way they weren't prior without an ethnic studies course. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Misson. Next is Shawnee Stevenson. You're authorized to speak, to be followed by Beth B.
Hello, this is Shawnee Stevenson. I'm a parent at Menlo Atherton. Last year, when my kids, after observing all my kids go through high school and had different experiences, a study of, I actually recommended a social justice study or something that really looks at seeing yourself in curriculum. And I was privileged to be a part of the link to the ethnic studies committee to really give input to that. I hear the concerns about making sure there's not division, that there's inclusivity, but we also know that history has some hard parts to it that aren't so pretty. And that's okay too. And it's okay to celebrate as well, but not one or the other, that it should be a balance. And so I'm happy that the curriculum has been looked at across the district, and that so many people have been put input, and that it was the students, former students, who really took charge and wanted to have this as part of their education. As a parent, I see my son and my daughter get excited listening about themselves, and not just the slavery piece of it, but the celebrations, the triumphs. And I think it's very important to their overall development. It led my daughter to lead a protest in East Palo Alto in June. It helped my son to see the connection between mass incarceration and slavery. He was able to kind of understand who he was. And he loves history, all history actually, but particularly history that is relevant to him, so that he can see himself and keep interested. So I urge us to kind of think about this, but also it maybe include some community stakeholders in the process of developing the actual curriculum, so that we cover all our blind spots. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Stevenson. Beth B., you should be unmuted, to be followed by Angelica Burleson.
Hello, thank you for letting me speak. I'm a parent of a student in the Sequoia Union School District, and of course, an ethnic study program would be very valuable, and to make a better world, it'd be a wonderful opportunity. The only thing I'd like to point out is that in this specific, the Sequoia Goals and Outcome called the Guiding Principles and the Proposed Ethnic Studies Model Curriculum, from this proposal, they're copied directly from a draft document that other people have mentioned that is still being developed and revised. And it was the version vetoed by the governor. So I just hope that and suggest it would be wise to wait until there's a final version before moving forward. There are many wonderful kinds of ethnic studies that are constructive and balanced based on guiding values. And I hope the board could also explore other goals and outcomes like the ones from the Los Angeles Unified School District before adopting some of the more controversial guiding values from the ESMC. And just to make a note, there were 75,000 public comments from the last draft of the Ethnic Students Model Curriculum and the Goals and Outcomes called Guiding Principles in the ESMC. And so that's another good reason to wait until the state has gone through its full revision process before moving forward. So please do not improve this until the state has finished its process. Thank you. And again, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. Next speaker is Angelica Burleson. You should be, we don't have you unmuted yet. And you're gone. Okay, I think you should be authorized to speak. Okay. All right.
Okay, go ahead. Can you hear me?
Yes. Yes, we can now.
Okay, so
I'm Angelica. I'm a former Carmont student. I graduated in 2018, and I also created the Ethnic Studies course at Karma along with Ms. Ramroth during my junior year of high school. I think it's very important that we have this course because my entire perspective was I got tired of learning about European history and the pretty things that was done for the United States. I did not see myself as a Black woman represented. I didn't see my Polynesian friends represented. And the entire thing about it is that we have to understand that our world is not perfect. We need to create culturally competent students. I've been in, places at Carmont where teachers have said, very insensitive things. And as the students learn, the teachers learn. While taking this course, I know some people are concerned about anti-Semitism. We speak about that. Like, you don't have to worry about being anti-Semitic in the class, because that's the whole point of the class, is so people can learn and we educate them on certain topics and certain things. And there is no war on history. History is very real. It's very alive. Everything's not going to be pretty. And you want your students to go out and be able to capture the world in real life and go on in their lives with thinking like they can just ignore certain issues. But yeah, that's all I had to say.
Okay, thank you very much, Ms. Burleson. Okay, well, I'm grateful to public for comment. I'd like to now turn to board discussion and questions and comments. So I'm going to take the liberty, I normally wait and go last, but I'm actually going to take the liberty and go first this evening. I'll just begin by saying I feel a little bit like the lonely whale. You perhaps know the story of the whale who speaks on a frequency that's different from all the other whales. And so that whale is sending out communications to all of the other whales, but none of the other whales can hear it because the frequency on which that whale communicates is different. And I say that only because when I heard the story about the history of ethnic studies in this district, I mean, I've been agitating for ethnic studies in this district for probably almost my entire time on this board, which is about 9 years. And I think had an important role to play in the creation of the first ethnic studies elective at MA. And so it's not as if nobody on this board was cognizant or aware of or supportive of the idea up until recently. The most important thing, though, is that I remain extremely supportive of this proposal of making ethnic studies a graduation requirement. And I think the idea of teaching the class in the 9th grade is an outstanding one. I was supportive 7 years ago, and I remain supportive today. I'm more supportive today because of the changes in our society that demonstrate the urgency and the critical need for us all to be educated about the issues that would be taught in an ethnic studies class. I mean, for me, I think when I was on the phone on my Zoom call with the Sequoia teachers, I remember Melissa and Diana saying, like, I didn't learn in my AP US history class about the Tulsa massacres. Right. I mean, that was, and I didn't learn about that until I was out of university, which to make sure that we have an understanding of our history. What I love about this, and I see that my internet connection is unstable, so I'm going to slow down. What I love about this curriculum or this proposal that's coming to us is its local character, that it is indigenous, if you will, and that it is a curriculum that is being designed by Sequoia Union High School District teachers for Sequoia Union High School District students. I think that's just a wonderful strength of what we're doing here. I think that's also really important because it also just disabuses us, or should disabuse us, of the concerns that we heard expressed in a number of the comments that were expressed by the public about adopting the state, the CDE ethnic studies model curriculum. Because that's, first of all, we do not have a curriculum proposed before us tonight to be adopted. The suggestion is that we go off and actually build one, right? But there's also no suggestion that we adopt the state's ethnic studies model curriculum. So that is a straw man that people are expressing concerns about. Bonnie Hansen mentioned that at the beginning. This curriculum is not the ethnic studies model curriculum. And so I don't think we have to be worried about the concerns or the objections. Now, I do think when I look at the course proposal and I'm looking at the teachers, the faculty members, it is a mistake in my mind that in your, what are described, let me pull up the document here, what are described in the new course proposal on what is page 5 of the PDF, when I look at the the goals that the ethnic studies course will teach, there's 7 items listed. And those are cut and paste verbatim from the ethnic studies model curriculum, which I think is a mistake, right? If we're building our own curriculum, we should identify our own goals about what that curriculum is going to teach, right? And it also helps reinforce the notion that I'm trying to make and that I think Ms. Hansen is making, is that our curriculum is not the ethnic studies model curriculum. That may be a great curriculum. It may be a terrible curriculum, but it's a deeply controversial curriculum. And I think this community, I think this board, and I think this community is ready to embrace an ethnic studies curriculum that does not involve the kind of the third rail issues that are in the state ethnic studies model curriculum. So I hope that we will go back and revise our course proposal to adjust and adapt the things that we indicate that the course will teach to really be indigenous, to be local, to be based on what we think we want to teach. I sent Ms. Hansen a copy of some guiding principles that have been adopted by LA Unified School District. I think anybody would look at those goals and say, like, those are awesome, those are great, those are perfectly consistent with everything we heard in our presentation tonight about how we don't seek to divide, rather this is something that helps students come together, right? Contrary to what Gavin Newsom said in his signing letter about the ethnic studies model curriculum, about that being imbalanced, this is inclusionary, not exclusionary. So let's do that. Let's walk that walk and then develop a curriculum that is based on the fine work that you have done, that is responsive to the needs of our local community, right? But that avoids kind of essentially bringing us into extracurricular or extraneous debates that we don't need to be, that we just don't need to be a part of. So those are my reactions. I'm enthusiastic. I'm not exactly sure what the board is being asked to do. I would be inclined to give direction to proceed with the development of a model curriculum. And I would be inclined as an individual board member to say that I would love to see staff come back with a formal recommendation that we make ethnic studies a graduation requirement. Okay, I'll turn to my board colleagues now. Also Jewish. My father's the only one in his family to survive the Holocaust, right? You know, there, I have my bona fides too. This is what we need in the world that our students are growing up in today. Trustee Jack.
Right, well, thank you very much. You've said a lot of probably what I would say, but I will go a little bit further. So I know out there in the audience are people who are members of the same synagogue that I am, Congregation Beth Jacob. I saw Mr. Levison appear. He was my son's elder for religious school. So again, I'm coming at this from a perspective, from several different perspectives, right? I'm a Jew who grew up in the Bay Area. I sent my kids to religious school. I paid dues to Congregation Beth Jacob. So I understand the concerns of my community. That said, to the point that my fellow colleague just made, this is not about approving a curriculum tonight. We are not doing that. We are providing, again, direction. We're providing support that we think this is the right thing to do, which it is. And I would like to also add into that direction that we can engage in our larger community as we need to. I think that's the right thing to do. And I think we could engage with Rabbi Israel. He is local. His daughter, actually not his daughter, I'm going to take that back. Bill's daughter, who is one of our clergy, went to Sequoia High School. And I think she'd be very proud to have her dad or Rabbi Ezra to be a consultant at some point as necessary. So I would offer that up. I think that's reasonable. I would also say that in terms of, I actually agree with Trustee Weiner a lot around localizing the context. I did see that you had the Bracero program in there, and I think that's a really important program. It's very important for many of our Latinx community members, particularly because their families got established through that program. I think it would be wonderful if, and I know we're not supposed to like bring ethnic studies down to an individual identity. I get that, but I certainly would like to be able to touch on, if it were possible, you know, particularly Michoacan, because that community is so integral to Redwood City and the peninsula. And so I just really would encourage us to make sure that, even though we don't want to like make this be about any one group in particular, but I think that's important. And there's a lot around around different religions and the different wars between religions, right? So we can look at the issues in South Asia around that, for example. And I understand that this is also not going to be a religious studies class. But again, when we're talking about all of those conflicts that come from religious frameworks, that come from national borders, that come from the ways in which humans want to be tribal, it's just somehow in our nature, even though, as one of our speakers said, you know, we are all the same, truly, biologically, we are all the same. I think it's important, though, that you have to talk about those things. Also, to this, oh, there were so many great speakers tonight. One of them mentioned something I think about not learning about history, but learning about what's happening today because history was over and done. No, we are experiencing the effects of the history of 400 years ago still today. So there, you know, you can, it's really important to make sure that we're weaving in the fact that we're sitting here today still living history started 400 years ago in some instances, and in other instances, it goes back even further. So I am fully supportive of this curriculum. I am fully supportive of the idea that we need to think about that, making it a requirement for graduation. And I fully am supportive that I don't believe the state of California, sorry, let me restate that. I don't believe the state of California should ever have gotten into the business of writing curriculum. They never have previously, and they should not have done it this time. And I am very proud of our teachers for taking this on, recognizing, as they have in their presentation, all of the fires that they could be starting with this, and willing to do that work to make this be a positive experience for all of our community, our high school community and our outside community. I think I really want to thank you for doing that. I think that's so important, and you are going to do amazing things. So thank you.
Thanks. I'm going to call on trustees first before Principal Priest, who has his hand up as well. So next is Trustee Nori, to be followed by Trustee Sarver.
Oh yeah, I would just like to say, like, thanks for everyone for taking this time to put this together. I don't think anyone can deny the importance of ethnic studies as a mandatory class, and that is something I wholeheartedly support. One thing to think about when developing the curriculum is that I think I get the purpose of making it local, and I think that's very important, but I do not think we should limit these discussions to just some in the United States, because issues surrounding race or ethnicity are by no means, or discrimination are by no means unique to the US. As someone who's witnessed firsthand issues surrounding colorism, homophobia, and racism in countries outside the Western world, like India, I think we do our students a disservice if we don't talk about the manifestation of these issues in countries outside the United States and the Western world, especially when colonialism caused much of these issues to talk about in the first place. I did study the curriculum, and from what I see of it right now, I do think it might be a little too focused on the United States, because a lot of the projects, like interviewing an immigrant or analyzing Supreme Court cases or talking about the Declaration of Independence, are things we did in APUSH, or things I've done in APUSH and my friends in regular US history have done currently. But other than that, I do think this is a great course, and I think it should be something that's mandatory. I just urge that when we are developing a curriculum, it should be a public process that involves stakeholders like students and community members to ensure that everyone is included in the curriculum and it has a positive impact on people. But yeah, thank you.
So I'm just going to say one thing about that. Look, I understand the importance of input, but like there are people who are expert in like subject matter, right? And like if you're to say like, oh, like I'm going to go have brain surgery, and so I'm going to go like I want to get a lot of input about whether I should like suture here on the left or here on the right. I mean, what people may want, right, in the curriculum, I mean, I think we have to take with a grain of salt. I mean, we wouldn't say like I want to have public input in like the algebra curriculum, right? Like, are we going to do polynomials or, I mean, this is a little bit of a professional art. And so I think being transparent about the development of the curriculum is one thing, but I personally do not concur with the idea that the curriculum should be written by a committee. Okay, so that's that. I'm going to call now on Trustee Sarver to be followed by Trustee Dubois.
Thank you. First of all, having had a couple of board colleagues go first and make some very eloquent statements is very, very helpful. And I want to thank you both for all three of you so far for the statements and leverage forward off of that. To me, this was a very compelling, well-constructed presentation, and it reinforces a clear understanding of the importance of having an ethnic studies component. I appreciate that all of the work that has been done has been faculty driven from a lot of alumni support and impetus, and that the ESMC curriculum was kind of leveraged as a reference point with a lot of clarification that is not going to be a driver or a controller to what we're doing, but that this needs to be focused on the needs and the specific circumstances of our community. So, I concur actually also with the last statement that President Weiner just made, that the demonstration of how important it is to rely on our faculty's expertise and wisdom is well borne out by the quality of the work that they have just presented this evening. They're going in the right direction, and we want to encourage them to go in that direction. One of the things I am concerned about, in having had all of the vetting and input about support across our campuses, is a little bit of the tyranny of the majority. I'm concerned that one of our site departments voted against moving forward in this direction, and I do hope that there is both the flexibility in the curriculum design and the opportunity for ongoing input across all of our departments to make sure that as we move forward into this, that community as well is very effectively brought along and included and becomes not only comfortable with moving in this direction, but active contributors to having the right version of this that works at each of our communities. I like the idea of the partnership with what will become 10th grade world studies that you talked about, and I think that's going to provide a lot of opportunity for ethnic studies across the world stage to become part of the 2-year program that goes on there. World studies, as I follow from this, will expand from 3/4 of a year to be a full year curriculum, which will allow things like going into greater depth on curriculum that may now seem to be inappropriately compressed to some teachers in that area. It will allow for a lot of focus on European study components to absorb some of that into the world studies and to follow up with the world studies perspective on ethnic studies being part of it. So I think that, there's a lot of potential there for the full 4-year program to be very strong. I'm glad to see that European Studies remains as an AP option available on campuses, so that as the ongoing desire for that curriculum component is expressed, it doesn't get lost from our offerings, but it becomes part of the rich tapestry of social sciences across the district. And that overall, the way that this has been driven so that it is a district-wide social science community effort really means that we are advancing the offerings that the district is going to be making. So with that, I'm really eager to see recommendations coming forward to allow us to do this as quickly as feasible.
Thank you, Trustee Sarver. So that brings me next to Trustee Dubois, and after that is Trustee Thompson. And I feel bad because I missed you in closed session, but this is where you are in the queue tonight, Chris. So Carrie and then Chris.
Yeah, I just want to say that this presentation makes me so proud of our district. I was just beaming. Thank you, President Weiner, for clarifying that this proposal is very different than the vetoed curriculum at the state level. I like this proposal so much because it's teacher driven, and that's what I get most excited about. Bonnie Hansen, thank you for putting together a fantastic group of educators that are passionate and smart and are leading the way. And
thank you. I did not put them together. I want to take credit because they're so awesome. They put themselves together.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. I'm going to give you credit anyway. I also want to do a shout out to Amy Koo, who's in the audience, the school board member from Belmont Redwood Shores. She has worked so hard to educate many of the school board members in San Mateo County. She has prodded us to attend various conversations, and she has done so much work at the state level. So thank you, Amy. And I also want to say I appreciated Trustee Nori's comments. I had a different reaction. When he was talking, I was thinking to myself, this kid is so smart. This kid is so articulate and so brave. He's brave in so many of our conversations, and we do need to have a conversation and listen to each other and learn from each other. I think the social sciences are different from algebra. It's a very human topic. And anyway, thank you, Trustee Nori. Thank you for leading the way and teaching us in so many of our conversations. So anyway, I have nothing but kudos. I love all of this, so thank you.
Thank you. Of course, it is only because I regard Mr. Nori so highly that I feel free to quite disagree with him as I would with any other board member rather than to patronize him or pamper him. I think he gets that.
I did think of that. I did think of that.
I'll call now on Trustee Thompson.
I do agree. Criticism from an academic is a form of highest praise. And so that's the way I heard President Weiner's comments about Trustee Nori, who is brilliant and provides amazing insights for us. There's the advantage here in coming at the end, and I can say I am in total agreement, I think, with the comments of all my colleagues on this issue. This initiative has my enthusiastic support. So the few questions and comments I'm going to share with you are really at the margins in the whole thing. The first is to agree with something President Weiner opened up with, which was, well, no, his response to Nori about, I don't think it's appropriate for us to seek public input on the development of curriculum. On the other hand, there are sensitive issues where I think we need to go overboard on the transparency of what the curriculum is all about. And these were the only form of concern we heard from the public was worries that conflate our curriculum with the state's curriculum. And so I'd like to see us in the next presentation be clear about the separation there and also address questions of why there aren't forms of anti-Semitism in this. The other thing I'd underscore from Alan's comments were supporting the local nature of the development of this initiative. I think it was probably 6 or 7 years ago where we heard a group of Stanford researchers report on the ethnic studies curriculum at San Francisco Unified School District, as I recall. And in speaking to one of the people who did the studies, I remember being told that was a very successful program. It was hard for them to separate out whether that success was inherent in the nature of the curriculum or depended so heavily upon the involvement of the local teaching staff who developed that curriculum. So I'm also proud of our teachers' work in that. I'm grateful to Karen, for example, who spent extra time with me to educate me on the coursework she'd provided for the district. The final question I have is really procedural more than anything else, and that's seeking clarification about trustee approval of curriculum versus trustee approval of graduation requirements. And my sense is the two should be separated, and yet if there's ways we can do that without slowing down the progress, it may be important. One of the slides had to do with the concern about not enough qualified teaching staff to cover the curriculum. I think we need to care about that and be cautious about it. The other thing I'd point out is that graduation requirements are embedded in board policy. So at the very least, I think it has to be two separate actions that we would need to take. Doesn't mean it doesn't have my support for moving forward as quickly as possible. Thank you.
Yeah, I agree with that. I will be looking at the end to guidance from staff on what happens. I mean, we don't approve curriculum as such, but we actually do approve every new course that's offered, right, typically. And we certainly approve graduation requirements. And as you say, those are embedded in board policy. Bonnie Hanson and I recently had some fun discoveries about the number of units that are required for graduation by looking at those policies. So that is correct. But before we come back to hearing from staff about what procedurally will happen or what staff is recommending happen next, I'd like to hear from Principal Priest, who apparently was an athlete earlier in his career. Didn't you describe yourself? Those of us who were student athletes, Sean?
I like to use the term scholar athlete. That's my preferred nomenclature. Hey, I don't want to get too caught up in editorializing because I think that the folks who made the presentation speaks for itself. I would just point out, as we think about what may or may not make those who have been traditionally centered uncomfortable in a curricular change, please know that the current curriculum does indeed have a perspective, does indeed have a point of view, and that a lot of our students and families have felt uncomfortable by that point of view for so long, they don't even know that they are uncomfortable. So something to keep in mind as we have these conversations about what our point of view is going to be with this curriculum. I'm bullish, enthusiastic. People know that about this change. I think it's long overdue. I may or may have not have referred to a modern European history graduation requirement as akin to a Confederate monument. I can't remember if I've actually said that out loud. But the point I want to make is timeline wise, this needs to happen like pretty quickly, because if we're going to be changing program planning handbooks, if we're going to be doing 4-year planning, if we're going to be staffing, training, getting things ready to go, we would love to do some real work around vertical alignment within our social studies department. This isn't just the idea here is not that this is just a one-off course. So I'm eager to hear the recommendation in terms of timeline. The quicker this decision gets made, and again, not to rush it, I think this has been very thoughtfully put in place and is in fact long overdue. But as we are going to do it or not, and the questions and input we want to get, the timing is kind of an essence. Just from an operational perspective, my perspective here is as someone who's built master schedules and is thinking already about plans for next year. The last thing I would say is just on the teachers who presented tonight. I have seen all of them in action, and what they do better than anything else is make kids feel good about themselves. When kids are bombarded through social media, through advertisement, through the toxic peer or family relationships or whatever, that they should not feel good about themselves, these are teachers that make kids feel good about themselves. And so whether or not they maybe are making them uncomfortable or raising challenging topics around identity or around ethnicity, they are doing so in a way that makes kids feel good about themselves. And so I think that's important to keep in mind, because this isn't just curriculum. This isn't just a course in a book or in a binder on a shelf. This is something that's taught by incredible human beings. And that, again, you know, just to characterize our staff in that way, I think is fair, as you've seen tonight and throughout the course of your careers in this district. So that's all. Thank you.
Thanks, Sean. Well, I think we would turn out to hear from staff about what we think. So I think you have a clear sense, everybody on the board is enthusiastic about the idea of an ethnic studies curriculum. By my count, everybody on the board is enthusiastic about the idea of making it a graduation requirement. And everybody is enthusiastic about it having being a curriculum that we develop rather than one that we get off the shelf from Sacramento. So with that direction, what would happen next do you think, Interim Superintendent Leach or Assistant Superintendent Hanson?
Ms. Hanson?
So if you look at the graduation requirements in Ed Code under Board Policy 6146.1 instruction, we have a 3.5-year social studies requirement, and it specifies that it includes 1 year of US history and geography, 1 semester of American government and civics, and 1 semester of economics. The other 3 semesters just have to be something, it doesn't say something, 3 semesters of world history, culture, and geography. So it is a change in graduation requirements, and it is not a change in graduation requirements, because it actually, this class would fall under the description of world history, culture, and geography. We don't anywhere put that modern European history is a graduation requirement. It's just what we've taught in this district over the years. So you will need to decide as a leadership body what you want to do with that. To Sean's point, this is definitely not a one-shot wonder class. It's got to permeate throughout other classes that kids take over the years. Vertical alignment by the sites is fantastic. We will be focusing on getting this course ready to launch in the fall. We have laid out the 2nd and 3rd semesters for the development of the curriculum. And then I think really importantly, the training of the teachers, so that we do have a cadre of teachers who are aware of the different sorts of nuances and concerns that can be raised, as we heard in comments tonight, when they're teaching this class, as well as how to steer kids into an experience where it brings them together, and where, as Sean described about his teachers, students feel lifted up by taking the class. So I would urge us that I think everybody or most people really want this class. The sooner we have your favor to go forth and develop the curriculum, that we go ahead and start doing that. You can approve the course without the curriculum being completely developed. We just wanted your approval before we put a whole bunch of time and resources into that curriculum development and lining up the training.
Okay, well, I think, again, from the conversation you heard, I'm not speaking for myself. I think it's quite clear that you have that approval. I would strongly encourage you to look at the course description again to make sure that we are clearly signaling and manifesting the fact that this is not the EMSC, that this is our own thing. So let's not cut and paste from that. And then the last thing I would just say to Ms. Cole, to Ms. Cuff-Alvarado, to Ms. Diaz, to Ms. Dice, to Ms. Hertier-Kirby, to Ms. Nguyen, Ms. Olson, Ms. Ramroth, thank you for your work. And thank you for a really tremendous presentation tonight. And I'm excited for what I'm sure is going to be, you know, forever known as the Alan Weiner Ethnic Studies Program in the Sequoia Union High School District. All right, thanks. Let's move on to, let's finish with that. I think we've been working for a while. It's about 8:23. Let's take a short break, come back at 8:30. But we have a lot on our agenda tonight, folks. So let's steel ourselves for being like super focused in the remainder of our discussion when we return at 8:30. So little break, see you in a few minutes. Okay, it appears that I have a full board reassembled. Thank you all for coming back timely. The next item on our agenda is another discussion item, item 14.2, and that is our now standard COVID-19 update. And so I will turn things over to Interim Superintendent Leach to tell us about what's new in Sequoia.
Yes, I do look forward to whoever knows when we're going to have to fill this time with some other type of update. Unfortunately, it probably won't be anytime in what we would refer to as the near future. So where are we? We made a decision to stay in distance learning through the first semester. This decision had several factors. In summary, we were still in the purple tier. Staying in distance learning through the semester allowed us to deliver the best quality instructional program. School sites were still under modifications for health and safety related to COVID precautions, such as HVAC modifications. It is important for us to remember, as we see some of our neighboring districts return to in-person instruction, that every district is different. We are a high school district. Our neighboring high school districts are facing some of our same challenges. All but one of our feeder districts is around a third of our size. A classroom which would normally hold 30 students can now only hold an average of 6 to 12 people. And with high schoolers switching classes and teachers every hour, this is a challenge. We have been busy. There has been a lot of work going on. We are working with our site administration teams and our labor groups on how and when students returning to campus will look like and what supports will be available to them. One item we have been able to finalize is the student support cohorts, which will initially address our students failing classes because of lack of access to connectivity and or a lack of quiet learning environment, students failing multiple classes, and our seniors failing courses required for graduation. As we think about the numbers of students needing supports, it's important to note the complexity of cohorts. Cohorts must remain stable for at least 3 weeks with up to 12 students and up to 4 adults. Members may not be added within the 3-week period. In order to change cohorts, a student or staff member must wait a minimum of 10 days. Remember that on average, our classrooms can only hold 6 to 12 people under current guidelines. We will begin next week a 3-week pilot of student support cohorts. Every 3 weeks, we will evaluate and determine necessary modifications to layer in additional supports based on the availability of staff and other health factors known at that time. So what about second semester? As we approach the yellow tier, reopening schools is not an open or closed door decision. We hear the concerns of our staff and our families for both opening for in-person instruction and remaining in distance learning while layering supports for our students. We are weighing safety, teacher availability, and the appropriate timing of these decisions. We will make decisions for second semester for the safest way to deliver the most quality instructional program. We are working on surveys to staff and our families on what they will need to feel safe about returning. The state requires us to have a plan for reopening. We are currently working on this plan, so we are ready for when that time arrives. Although we have been actively practicing many of the protocols, this plan will specifically address the following: cleaning and disinfection, cohorts, entrances, including egress and movement within the schools, PPE, health screenings for students and staff, hygiene practices and education, contact tracing, physical distancing, staff and family education on enforcement of the plan, testing of students and staff, triggers for transitioning back into distance learning, and a communication plan. Many of these protocols have been shared in previous presentations. I know this is such a difficult time and we have such hunger for normalcy. We are creating our new normal with the safety of staff and student at the forefront of our minds while determining the best way to deliver instruction. I'm going to open up for questions and comments.
Okay. Are there comments or questions? I imagine that there will be from board members. Seeing, yeah, Trustee Jack and then Trustee Nori.
Gosh, how did I get to be the first one this time? So I guess I have heard a rumor, and I don't know where this rumor came. Seriously, I don't know where this rumor is coming from. But apparently, RCSD, Redwood City School District, has recently stated in public that they heard we were opening January 19th. So curious about that, since I don't think that we've made any decision, but I think that there's a rumor. So perhaps we need to talk to Superintendent Baker about that. Also, you know, I think my concerns are around how we are looking at the students that we're going to identify as most needing support, because I know I brought this up to Assistant Superintendent Hanson previously. We've talked about students that we know who are EL special ed, not attending class, and I was told somehow we can't identify those students. I've been, you know, there are questions around the students who are failing. So what are the criteria for these support groups? How are we going to ensure that we are meeting their needs? I think those right now are my two most pressing questions. Also, I understand that our outdoor spaces should be reopening for both the public and students. And so I'd like a schedule for that, as well as how the public's going to know when they can utilize those spaces. Because, you know, not only do our students need to get out and about, and the parks are now starting to reopen, and just the idea that no one's been able to get out there and get their energy out is frustrating. But our schools, both the elementary schools and high schools, serve as a community benefit in providing additional park space, and we need to make sure that the community is accessing that. So those are right now the questions on my mind.
So I'll take the one about identifying students who are coming back for support groups. And we had 3 criteria. The first one is students failing classes because of lack of access to connectivity and or a lack of a quiet learning environment. The second was students failing multiple classes. And the third was seniors failing courses that are required for graduation. As far as how are we going to make sure that those kids come back? Staffs are working diligently right now to get a consent form signed that has to be signed by parents and students stating that they understand the requirements of being part of a cohort. And that's also letting us know how serious those who fall into one or more of those 3 groups is about coming back. That said, today at Carlmont, we had 25 fewer kids out of 75, so about 50 out of about 75 kids show up for SAT testing today. So how many of those kids will actually be there on that first support cohort day when the rubber hits the road and a parent is sending their kid out the door to go to school? I don't know the answer to that question, but we will work furiously to have the next kids in line ready to go and join the cohort immediately if that happens. We intentionally, Georgia, did not identify kids as being specifically EL or being specifically special ed. We identified them by how they're doing, because some of our EL kids and some of our SPED kids are doing just fine. And some of our kids who don't fall into any of those categories are not attending and failing most of their classes.
So I would like to ask, and maybe this could be for our superintendent, that the board should be getting reports on the numbers of students. And I think we should be getting them of students not participating based on school site, because right now, all we're getting is a lot of generalization. So it's really hard for us to know what exactly is happening in terms of those students.
Received. We'll work on getting you that information. In addition to those questions, comments about opening the facilities. So the track field and tennis courts will be opened back up to the public starting this Saturday. The restrooms, unfortunately, will not be able to be open. The restrooms, BC, before COVID, the restrooms were open because we had staff that was working Tuesday through Saturday due to extensive activities that occurred at the sites. It made sense to have a custodian there since we are very limited on what type of activities that can actually occur to site. Staff has been focused for Monday through Friday to make sure that we are constantly in cleaning for the staff and then also the students that will be arriving next week. We can look at opening the restrooms again, possibly in a few weeks if we continue to better where we are sitting in the tier system. We have not, before, we have not put any of this information on the website. But we can look at sharing this information since our sites have been closed for a long time. The signage is currently up for physical distancing, wearing masks at our tennis courts and at the football field and the track already. So we are ready to go on that. And I'm assuming once we start to see community members walk around, they will start to see that the gates are open again.
Thanks. Trustee Nori, to be followed by Trustee Sarver.
Yeah, I kind of had a question related to Trustee Jack's first question, which is like, if trends continue their current way with COVID-19 cases going down, do you envision us starting some sort of a hybrid model second semester?
We are exploring all models for second semester. The tiers do have to get better, but it is, as I stated, the complexity of it related to size, schedules, teacher availability, all of those do play a factor in it. We have identified districts around the state that are currently, as of today, doing a form of a hybrid model. So we are seeking out what works, what doesn't work, what their, situation is as far as testing goes, and other health protocols so that we can learn from them to see if that fits within our model. These conversations will start taking place very frequently. We are gearing up for that. So at the next board meeting and in between these board meetings, communications will be going out as we continue to work with site administration and then also both of our labor groups to figure out what second semester is going to look like.
Trustee Sarver, to be followed by Trustee Thompson.
Okay, thank you. For me, one of the things that I spend each morning doing is looking at all of the statistics that are out there in newspapers and on the state sites and the county sites and everything about kind of how it's going. And we're seeing, the kind of slow, bumpy decline from the summer peaks in the Bay Area region. But we're not seeing dramatic good news all over the place in terms of trends. What we're seeing is a disease that's going to be with us for a good long time. And trying to project forward and think about even the magic of the great vaccine coming and sweeping the world, that's not going to have a universal impact in a matter of just a few months. So we are looking forward to a foreseeable future of living in a world where we are living with COVID, where we are trying to manage COVID. And we need to look at, the two sides of that, which includes that we have to be taking the precautions that can allow us to function safely. And that has to remain at the absolute forefront of our minds. And we can't be paralyzed by the fear that it can't be done and that we need to hide at home until the magic happens. Because we would easily be looking at the start of next school year, wondering when the magic is going to happen and how much longer we will need to continue hiding then. And we can't allow ourselves to drift into that position. So I think that, opening the learning hubs is a tremendous next step forward that is being taken. And I want to really congratulate all of our hardworking staff and our bargaining units for the work that has been done to get us ready to be doing that. I'm very excited for the staff members and the families that are stepping forward to participate in that. Not only are we really selecting the students with the greatest needs to really be met on campus, but we are going through a proof of concept of the preparations we've been taking that will be adding to our confidence to be able to more and more thoroughly be in charge of our planning of how we continue opening up further. And as we take each step with greater confidence and greater proof of concept, the next steps will become more confident and more effective. So this is a tremendous important point to be at and to be doing that. I think as I look around at the different school boards in our county with which we interact, they are all casting around to say, how do we look like we're at the forefront of the reopening effort, but how do we be very, very safe and not be those ones that have an infection outbreak and drive us all backwards? And most of the ability to take steps forward is concentrated in the K through 8 districts, and particularly in the primary grades, where small groups of students who remain fixed in one classroom for the day can meet some of the small cohort models more effectively. And they are all looking at more opening in the single subject environments of middle school and high school, second semester, somewhere down the road. And they're all experiencing huge amounts of pushback from staff and from certain parent groups about even that is too fast and what are you doing? Conflicted by a lot of feedback from other members of the community saying, why the heck aren't you open and why aren't we just going back to it? So we all have to continue collaborating with each other across districts as well as within district to really be doing the best that we can and getting both of those needs met, of getting more and more of our students on campus to take those benefits and doing it safely so that we're not marching backwards. We're clearly seeing across Europe communities that have tried to take strong, aggressive stances to reopening in controlled environments are seeing that they're taking steps back and shutting down now as outbreaks happen. I speak weekly with a range of my relatives across Eastern Canada, and in Toronto and Ottawa and Montreal, they are closing back down their economies and closing their schools because their careful efforts to open up led to greater outbreaks, and they're stepping back. So we have to be very realistic and careful in the safety first. And we have to be focused on working on the steps to do a little more and a little more. The underlying thing that comes to me out of all of this is that distance instruction is going to continue to be the backbone of the education that we deliver to our students for the foreseeable future. And all of the work that we do must be based on making sure that we don't interfere with or compromise the march forward in the quality of distance instruction that we're delivering. But we need to be looking continuously at how we can layer on more and more of the in-person supports on top of that without disrupting it, without disabling it. And I just hope that that continues to be kind of the focus of our planning sessions, of saying, how do we make our distance instruction be better and better and greater, and more student participation on campus in safe ways that work for all without disrupting the good things that we're doing through the huge work that's going on. I'm excited that we're making progress there. I want us to remain focused on making progress and looking at plans and schedules, but we also need to remain really conscious that the conditions on the ground are going to continue to have the biggest impact on that progress ahead, and that it's going to be slow and unsteady despite our great interest in making it be fast and smooth and predictable. And we need to be patient as well as we are careful and strong. So thank you for the update, and I look forward to more information, and I look forward to any way that I can be of any help in the conversations that go on.
Thanks. Trustee Thompson, to be followed by Trustee Dubois.
To begin, we on the board can't say enough to recognize the hard work that teachers and the leadership team of the district are doing in these circumstances. And I hope I recognize that. I think all of my colleagues recognize how difficult it is, how hard you're working, how important it is. I just wanted to share one observation with you coming from the email I read, which tends to be from parents who are expressing frustrations and concerns, understandable concerns about kids not getting back to school, and at the same time pointing to districts that are apparently doing more than we are. And from my observations, I don't think that's actually the case. I mean, we hear about Palo Alto going back to school, but it's my understanding Palo Alto isn't closer to getting back to school than we are, which makes me want to suggest we need to do more on the communication side. Mr. Sarver pointed to a variety of the things the district, steps forwards the district is making towards opening up, which are really important. I'd add to that Jackie McAvoy's work in getting test agreements on testing, which I understand we've got something in place now, at least for the teaching and staff side. But what I see is constant progress, and I'm not sure we're communicating that enough to either board, to the board, or to parents in the district in particular. And I don't follow the communication, all the communication that's coming out at the school level. And so maybe it's happening there, but I guess I'd encourage us to, I know it's extra work, but to spend more time on that communication. So for example, if you go to the district website, there is on the homepage an update on plans to reopen, but the most recent thing there that I've seen, I think, is from September. And yet a lot has happened since that was published at the time. I think this will help show parents in the district that we're making progress so that when it's safe to open, we'll be in a position to open. It also communicates to parents that we recognize that getting kids back in school is fundamentally important. Even while we also emphasize that doing that in a healthy way for teachers and students is critical. So that's it.
Thank you, Chris. Trustee Dubois, and then Ms. Salvatore would be next. And I think, well, then I'll be next. And then I think we have somebody from the public who would like to address the board.
Yeah. And then Ellen Weiner, as we're having this conversation, you might need to clarify when we're all finished, you know, what is direction, right? Because I think sometimes we're confused. We say things and we think something's going to come back, but it takes more than one board member to ask for something. So there's kind of a lot being thrown out. So you might need to summarize when we're all done with our talking points.
I don't think any direction has been given. I think a lot of people are saying what they think.
Well, I think there's been some requests made, which I agree. You know, Georgia suggested that we get some reports. That was one board member.
Go ahead.
And so I agree with her. We've talked before, even before COVID, that it'd be useful for this board to track attendance, which I think is a huge problem area for our district. Now it's not so much attendance, it's engagement. And what I'm hearing and what concerns me, I think there's people in the community, could be our staff members like teachers or people in the community who are very concerned that a lot of kids are not in school right now. They're not engaged, but the board doesn't have any, we haven't had any reports or any data on that, but there are staff members who say that we're doing weekly reports on engagement, that it's required now as part of the LCAP, but yet we don't see that. So anyway, at the end of our discussion, if you could maybe sum up whether we are going to get that or not. Because I think it's important. If there are problem areas, I think we just need to be really upfront and open about it so that we can really zero in on what's not working. And then I want to continue some of the things I brought up in a closed session when we were talking about this new side letter. I was concerned when I read the front page article about San Mateo Union. They are having problems with their learning hubs. They brought back their most at-risk kids, special ed, ELL, most at risk, and many of the kids are not participating in the hubs. And that really scared me when I read that. So some people might say, well, we need to be optimistic. We're working really hard. We're going to make it work. But I'm wondering if instead we should say, boy, those are real big red flags. Should we pause and think about why it could be that it's really hard to bring our most at-risk high school kids back to these learning hubs? It works in elementary school, right? Like Ravenswood District is having great success with learning hubs with their young kids because there's really something in it for the kids, not just academics. They're coming back to, you know, like the partnership with Boys and Girls Club, where there's lots of fun around the hubs, or something like East Palo Alto Tennis, where kids are doing academics, but they're also doing tennis. I feel that often as a district, we focus just on the academics, and I don't know if it always works, right? And so kids might attend the hub once or twice and then not go back. So anyway, I'm wondering if because they were having problems and we have a lot more at-risk kids than they have, should that be a reason to pause and really talk about that? Why are they having trouble? Because we're not there yet. So I think and then I agree with Chris on the communication. You said that very eloquently. A lot of work has been done, but our parents are coming to us and saying, what are you doing? And parents want their kids back. And our parents said to us when this first started, they would be happy, even if their kids were going back just to clubs for something. Kids need to get out of the house. And you know what our kids want? They want to be with their friends. They want the fun part of high school, right? For me, that is a priority. And then when you have the fun and you have the confidence, then you do well academically. And also the mental health piece. There's just a lot, right? But I think our parents really want their kids back. So there's going to be a lot of pressure. And I also the last thing I'm going to say is I do not want people turning on our teachers again, you know, what we experienced last spring. I really don't want that. And I think the communication will help. And I love this theme that we're all in it together, but being in it together, a big piece of that is the communication. And for kids to be successful, it's the fun.
Well, speaking of teachers, this would be a timely time to give the podium to Ms. Salvatore.
What a nice sort of handoff that was. I wanted to sort of echo that. I think a big difference in the sort of COVID update that we're hearing tonight, as opposed to the presentations we had over the summer, was that this presentation really recognized the hurdles that are still there. You know, there's a difference between saying, here is the protocol we need to follow, and then recognizing what the hurdles are to following that protocol and whether or not that protocol is realistic. You know, we seem to have come quite far, but we still have over 2,000 students on 3 of our campuses. And it's quite possible that we wouldn't be able to follow the protocols with 1,000 of those students at a time on those campuses. In addition, we've now lived through, as Trustee Nori mentioned, 9 weeks of our distance learning schedule, and students and teachers are still struggling with the limited live interaction class time that we have, and the proposals for hybrid type schedules that we saw over the summer would cut that live interaction time in half and make it that much more difficult to deliver curriculum. So it would be, as we look forward and we want to be open to all possibilities, we're going to need to be creative about what that's going to look like so that we can maintain the teacher-student connections that we need to have to help students be successful, while also providing what in-person interactions we are able to within the constraints of safety and scheduling.
Thank you. There are a couple of members of the public, and I'd like to go ahead and open this topic up for public comment now before finishing with my own comments on this. And so the first person who is in the queue is Kari Mueller. So let's do 3 minutes in accordance with we have 2 speakers, so we can go ahead and do 3 minutes per speaker, to be followed by Caroline Krauskopf.
Am I good to go?
You are so good to go.
Okay, thank you. I agree with one of the board members' earlier comments. Communication has been very sparse. I think the last thing we got was sometime in mid-September. So parents are definitely looking for communications, and radio silence means we assume that nothing is happening, which gets really frustrating. My personal frustration is I feel like we've known what we need to do for months, probably 5 to 6 months. Ventilations, open windows, PPE equipment. It's a big list. I've emailed that to you guys, I think a few dozen times, or at least a dozen. So I feel like we've known what we need to do for a long time. Parents have volunteered to help. I know I personally have. There's a group of us who would definitely do that. I think the frustration level is that we have not been told what the goalpost is. What needs to happen to get the kids back on school? Back in school, back on campus. We're in a tier now where they're allowed to go. Scott Morrow has very, very openly said he wants kids back on campus for in-person learning. So did Nancy McGee. I know a lot of parents, including myself, that want our kids on campus. And so my question to you is, why can't the people who want to go, go? Let the students, let the teachers, let the staff who want to go, go. Support those who don't want to in online learning. That's my biggest question. We know things are getting better. We just had a release from the CDC that now people under 70, it's 0 to 0.3% is a fatality rate, which is in line with influenza. It's getting better. 70,000 college students have been tested positive, 3 hospitalized, 0 deaths. The data is amazingly good. And I'm really frustrated that there's just no communication, no goalpost, and no understanding from the parent side and what we need to do to get our kids on campus. I agree with the other person who said that the frustration for me right now comes with the teachers union. I know teachers personally who want to go back. I'm left thinking that this is a teachers union problem, and that leaves me really frustrated and not very interested in donating my time, money, and resources. And I think others agree. Thank you.
Thank you. I have next in the queue, Caroline Krauskopf. Ms. Krauskopf, you're no, you're not unmuted yet. Okay, Ms. Krauskopf, I think you are good to go.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
I can indeed. Thank you.
Thank you. So I would like to agree with Trustee Sarver, who said that we are going to be living with COVID for a while. And there will be no magic bullet, even should one of these vaccines come. So I think it's important that we just learn to figure this out. That being said, I am very curious about what happened to the blue schedule stage 2.5, which was presented on June 24th. This was presented by the board. It was approved. We were told it was going to start in August. And then the decision was postponed, and it was to have begun on August 13th. There were to have been cohorts, some sort of A-B changing back and forth. And then we were told it was going to start on January 4th. Now, all of a sudden, that's all mysteriously disappeared, and there will be no school. There will be no hybrid. There will just be these sorts of needy children going back. That's all well and good and marvelous. And I'm very fortunate that I have 4 children, I should say. My eldest is in the Army, and so he's not in the situation right now. But thankfully for me, none of my children are failing, and so none of them are going back to school. But what happened to this stage 2.5 transition to stage 3? I don't know. And so there's no anymore hybrid. There's no nothing. There's no communication. I don't know what's happening. I went and looked up from June 24th, 2020, blue schedule stage 2.5. It was approved by you all, and it was to have started. And then we were told it would start on October 13th. Then we were told it was going to start on January 4th. Now it's disappeared. We're in the red tier. It's disappeared. Athletics is starting, connectivity cohorts are starting, people who are failing are starting. But what about average children, like my children? How many of you all have 3 children sitting in your house doing online learning? It's horrible, it's terrible, and it doesn't work. My kids will happily wear masks. They've all had flu shots, and we all want them to go back to school. Please tell us what's going on and how we can facilitate getting everybody back to class and back to some sort of normalcy as soon as humanly possible. Please help us get this working soon.
Thank you. Okay, and Trustee Nori, did I miss you? Or are you back in the queue?
Yeah, I'd just like to say one thing quickly. Oh, yeah, it's just that a lot of what the public comment said, I do tend to agree with, not necessarily the parts about like forcing some goal lines to go back, but I do think we should be open, because if the conversation right now is that like, oh, we aren't foreseeable going to go back for the second semester at all, or there's a very low possibility of there being a hybrid model, I feel like we should be open about that right now, because I know a lot of my friends, and myself included, would really like to go back or have some sense of normalcy. So if we're gonna like say like, oh, there's a really low chance of that happening, or like we're not planning or anticipating us going back, I think we should be open about that right now with the public.
Okay, so it's are you raising your hand, Georgia Jack? Are you scolding someone? Okay. All right. So my turn. I mean, look, a lot of thoughtful comments from my board colleagues, although they in some ways went in somewhat inconsistent directions. I will say this. We are seeing improvements, gradual, incomplete in the public health situation. Early data, which we have to take with a grain of salt, is that where schools have reopened in the United States, in California, we have not seen big increases if it's well managed. And I do think that our goal has to be to move in the direction of trying to get kids back on campus for in-person instruction, because I do think that although we've made great strides with distance learning, there are too many students for whom it doesn't work. And so then the question is, what are the obstacles? And I think we're hearing some of that tonight. We've heard some of a discussion about that, but we think we need to really be like thinking systematically. What are the obstacles? Is it testing? Is it PPE? Is it ventilation? Is it density? Is it food delivery? Is it the willingness of instructors to come onto campus? And then that's a subject that is a conversation that we have to have with our teachers union and with AFSCME, is like, well, what stands in the way of having teachers, come back to campus to teach in person, and ask it as a question, right? And to see what stands in the way. The only other thing I would say is, this is an area where I disagree a little bit with Trustee Dubois. It's a 9-year-long disagreement, so it won't come as a surprise. But I'm going to persuade her, the next couple of weeks, I think. But I think, parents want more than to have their kids on campus for, social actions. I think they really want their kids to be in the classroom, because I think, as we heard, online learning, I think people feel is, even though it's improved, is really not the same. So takeaways, right? So giving direction. This is actually not new. I think this came up very early on, right when we started the return to school. One of the things that the board, I think, had quite clearly expressed was that we wanted to be seeing regular data on things like student engagement and attendance, to the extent that we're having. I mean, I think the assumption was, okay, it looks like for the first couple of weeks, people are feeling a lot better about remote instruction, but we really need to see whether the proof is in the pudding. And so I think it is, I think, the case, not a new request, but a standing request, is that the board in our COVID updates is interested in having a sense of seeing student, data about student performance, attendance, number of zeros, whatever, failing grades. Now that we have them, we're going to have, it's now 2.5 hours or 1.5 hours until grades are due, right? So we should have, quarter grades and hope, I'm sure, to see a report on that. And then I think the other thing that comes quite clearly out of the conversation is that there's a sense that our outreach and our communication, has to be better. We don't necessarily have to wait until we have like some dramatic new development, but like everything that we're doing, like, let's kind of have our, if it's together we go, or we go together, like our public should be going with us too, right? So I think those are, two things that I think come out of the conversation. Anything further from board colleagues on any of these points? If not, I'm mindful of the fact that it is 9:15 and we still have like 5 items to do, some of which are not unhefty. So let's go ahead and move on to item 14.3, which is a discussion of a possible resolution in support of Proposition 15. As you may recall, this was something that Ms. Horton asked us to consider, and we have done some, collected a little bit of information about it, and we had promised that we would, not that we would necessarily adopt a resolution in support of Proposition 15, but that we would at least discuss it as a board. So here we are to discuss it as a board. And I think Ms. Leach is going to kick off this discussion for us.
Yes, as November is right around the corner, and one of the big items on there is Prop 15. There's different ways that you can look at Prop 15. And so as we bring it for the board discussion, I have included some guest opinions. The district does belong to an organization that is a part of School Services of California. It's called, acronym is SF Squared, School Finance Squared. It represents a lot of the basic aid districts in the state of California, and how different legislative actions affects basic aid districts versus state-funded districts, how it affects them overall together. So also includes their opinion, and then SDTA kindly shared their advocacy and how much the district would receive with the passage of Prop 15. So I'll kick it over to some discussion, as I have spoken with board members, and some of you have also done your own research.
Now we'll start with Ms. Salvatore, who was quickest to the blue hand.
So you have seen in the board background our slideshow that shows that our district, Sequoia District, would benefit from this. We would see just over $800,000 to just under $900,000, depending on the estimation. But for our students and the future of our district, another point that's not in the slideshow that's really important. Redwood City Elementary would see nearly $5 million in increased funding through Prop 15. Ravenswood would get nearly $2 million in increased funding through this. The city of Redwood City would benefit by $22.6 million. East Palo Alto by $4.5 million. Menlo Park by $11.5 million. San Carlos $4.1 million. It would be a boon to our communities beyond our school district, but $826,000 is nothing to sneeze at for our district either. The model for funding schools in California is broken. It is not fair that because you were born or you are being raised in one zip code, your schools are better funded than if you were being raised in a different zip code in our state and in our country. But that is unfortunately the model within which we have to work. Prop 13 decimated our schools. I am the perfect age to know that, because Prop 15 hit right as I started elementary school. And my ex-husband used to talk about the he's older than I, the very clear distinction of the number of field trips he went on as an elementary school student the year before and the year after Prop 15 affected school district budgets. This is a step towards rectifying that. It is on tax on commercial properties only. Family businesses are exempted. It's properties valued at $3 million or more only. This is not something that is going to hurt small business owners, family farmers, etc., but it is going to benefit tons and tons of students in the state of California. I've already voted for it. Many of us have already voted. We hope that you could stand with the students and the communities of California and be in favor. Thank you.
Thanks. Okay, I think I have next Georgia Jack, followed by Satvik Inori.
So actually, I'm probably going to put Chris Thompson on the spot, but because one of those opinion pieces that was conveyed along with the item is from Jennifer Bester, who is well known in the Menlo Park area for being a pretty good, I'd say, a crack financial analyst, right? And so I always, seriously, I live in the Redwood City School District. So obviously I would love to have the ability to boost revenues for Redwood City for sure, because they are only just now a basic aid district. And that is great for them, but they could easily fall back into a state funded district. And as we know, one of the problems with state funding is that it does not make cost adjustments for cost of living for staff. And that's a huge problem. So of course I want to believe in the sunny side of life, but I don't know if you've all realized this, that's just not in my nature. So I'm curious, I think Chris has probably had a conversation with Jennifer about her view, and a little bit of me is now leaning into the Alan Weiner camp of resolution that makes me crazy. It doesn't actually, again, I would like to believe in the sunny side here, but I just have a few qualms about what this actually means, how it's being sold, and what truly would happen. You know, the initiative process in California has given us a lot of bum deals, including Proposition 13, for sure. So I cede, and I hope that Chris will give us some information.
Well, let's go ahead and hear from Trustee Nori, and then Chris, if you're ready to come back, we'll pick you up after we're through the queue.
Oh, yeah, I just like to echo some of the things. Like, I don't think anyone disagrees that like raising property taxes on commercial properties is necessary and good, but what I have a big problem with is like how the split roll funding works. I think the problem is like, I believe that if like San Mateo County is going to raise something like $770 million more from this property tax, I feel like more of it should be staying local and going to our schools because of this, a lot of it is going to the state. And I think I read somewhere that if this proposition was passed 10 years ago, Sequoia Union High School District would have actually had less money now because of the way the funding is distributed. And I think the same thing applies for Ravenwood. So even even districts that do have a lot of inequity in areas, surrounding areas that do have a lot of privilege, Ravenswood would have lost money if this proposition was passed 10 years ago, which is why I do think it is good to pass, to raise the property taxes and close loopholes for commercial properties. But I'd be very hesitant to support this because of the way funding is distributed, and I'm unsure. And I just think that more of this money should be staying local and in our school districts, but yeah.
Trustee Sarver?
Once again, I'm blown away by student trustee Nori's depth of knowledge and research. I had the privilege through the work of Trustee Thompson to actually have a conversation with Jennifer Bester about her analysis. And the key points that trustees Jack and Nori have both raised were the main things that she hit on in that analysis. Which is that basically the Silicon Valley Bay Area is going to be used as the piggy bank for the state for harvesting commercial property tax, and that the flow would be very heavily into Southern California. And as far as schools are concerned, it would be going primarily into those counties that have allocated historically a lower percentage of their property taxes for education. And it's based on the local decisions of various counties of whether or not they have chosen to highly support education. They would inversely get more funding out of this. And San Mateo County would be seen as a property tax rich region that shouldn't be allowed to keep its local property taxes, but it should go to the needy because of those local decisions. And an awful lot of it would go into Los Angeles in particular, but other parts that are mentioned in the guest opinion article. For me, you won't find a stronger supporter of the need to review Prop 13 and what was done wrong there, and how badly served the state was by codifying it into the Constitution for all time. This change would also codify it into the Constitution and stick us with those changes for a good long period of time. I would not be averse to accepting changes that would have virtually no impact or a small negative impact on Sequoia if it had a major positive impact long-term on our local feeder districts, and so benefited our students from start to finish. But as Jennifer Bester's analysis indicates, within as little as 5 years from now, we will no longer, across our footprint and across the Bay Area, be getting the kind of local property tax increases we've been used to. That money instead will be disappearing into the state pot and being redistributed to Southern California. And the net result is that our feeder districts, where the need is greatest, would be seeing less funding out of the balance than they are today. and Sequoia would be seeing significantly less funding than we're seeing today. With that, I'd like to cede it to Chris, who I think probably has a stronger grasp on all of this and can probably clarify and state it in greater depth.
Well, actually, in fact, Ms. Horton is in the queue next. So Grace is up and then Chris.
You want to, Mr. President, are you calling on public? I see one hand.
I'll do that afterward. Yeah.
Okay. Thanks.
So I'm next. Thank you. I just want to reiterate the numbers that Edith shared. And on top of that, I also noticed that our school district does a lot of comparison with neighboring school districts. And I just want to add to this conversation that after reaching out to my school board, I also put in some volunteer work for Prop 15 and emailed our neighboring school boards, and the amount of support that I got from Superintendent Sean over at Cabrillo, where he's telling me at 11:17 p.m. they passed Prop 15 resolution unanimously. Michelle, Superintendent Michelle in the San Carlos School District passed the Prop 15 unanimously. Her email came to me at midnight. So as soon as they passed it, they were so eager to reach out to me and say, thank you so much for contacting us. We're on board. I found others like Superintendent Joan from the San Mateo Foster City School District that passed Prop 15 resolution unanimously on September 10th. And I have two more champions that got on the list. Assistant Superintendent Ted of Business Services at the South San Francisco Unified School District, where he's telling me that on January 16th, they passed Prop 15 unanimously. And after his email, Superintendent Shantira of South San Francisco Unified sent me a copy of their fully executed resolution, and again was thankful that I was reaching out to our neighboring school districts asking for their support on Prop 15. So tonight, I can't do anything else but urge us to look at all of the positives, right? And go forward with being on the list of these champions to pass a resolution unanimously. I did invite an expert. Hopefully that person can bring more light in detail and answer all of the questions that have been risen tonight. Thank you.
Okay, Trustee Thompson. Well, I mean, is the person Mr. Grief or Greif who has his hand raised in our public, is that your expert? Okay, well, why don't we then go ahead, since let's alter the queue a little bit and go ahead and see if we can unmute Mr. I don't know if it's Grief or Greif, forgive me if I'm mispronouncing it. If we, you should be authorized to speak.
Yes, thank you. Can you hear me?
I can.
Yeah, thank you so much for giving me the opportunity. My name is Ben Grief. I am the campaign director with Evolve California. We are a grassroots nonprofit based in San Francisco, and we are part of the executive committee for the Yes on 15 campaign. And, you know, I just wanted to offer a couple of things, sort of more big picture. You know, San Mateo County Board of Supervisors unanimously passed a resolution recently supporting Prop 15 because Prop 15 will bring in $405 million every year of reliable, stable revenue back to San Mateo County. And, you know, that's a lot of money. And in a time when not only our schools, but also our local governments, our county governments, and even our state are facing unprecedented budget deficits, this is reliable, stable revenue that we desperately need. And unfortunately, if we're not able to pass Prop 15, then we're going to face long-term cuts to all of our services that we all rely on, or we're going to face even higher taxes on individuals that we're all, bearing the brunt of now. Because we've lost $150 billion over the last 40 years, because large commercial property owners like Disney or Chevron or, the Transamerica Pyramid in San Francisco are not paying fair market value property taxes, we've shifted the property tax burden onto homeowners. And we've shifted other tax burdens on to individuals and working families, including having the highest income tax in the country, having the highest sales tax in the country, the second highest gas tax in the country. And the parcel taxes and bond measures and everything we've had to do, that's just quite frankly unsustainable. And so this initiative needs to be looked at with a larger lens. And the fact that this is $12 billion statewide of reliable revenue going to our local governments and our schools. It's not going to the black hole of Sacramento. We, as been mentioned here, we have specific revenue estimates for, school districts as well as cities and counties. But also, this provides $390 million a year for our fire districts. And right now, when we're facing unprecedented fires, and we will be facing these unprecedented fires for years to come, we need to figure out how are we going to best prepare ourselves? How are we going to best make sure our communities are safe? And this is reliable, stable revenue to do just that. So I would also just like to say that, with all due respect to Jennifer Bester, some of her analysis is just really not taking into account some of the facts. Our initiative specifically says that the funding will flow through existing funding formulas. So we know how much money counties and cities and school districts are going to get based on existing formulas. Prop 15 doesn't change any formulas. It just provides more money going into those pots of money. And so if we decide at some point in the future that we no longer want to use the local control funding formula, then Prop 15 money will go into whatever, funding formula that we have then. So we're not changing any funding formulas here. We're just increasing the amount of money that goes into every school district, every city, and every county in California. And, it's righting a 42-year wrong. Prop 15 was never, or Prop 13, was never supposed to be for Disney or for Chevron or for the Sultan of Brunei, who owns 2 hotels in Beverly Hills and is undertaxed by $6 million a year. This is what this common sense initiative is working to do. And so if we're waiting for some perfect solution, some sort of panacea that is going to, provide equal funding for every place in California, we're just going to be waiting forever. Or we can do this common sense initiative that just simply puts our state on par with how the rest of the country taxes large commercial properties while following existing funding formulas that we have here in California. So I will leave it at that. I'm happy to take any questions that folks might have.
Thank you very much. Chris?
Sure. Let me begin by saying I like the work of Evolve California. I think Ben makes a really important point about how California property tax has shifted from what used to be 60% of the revenue was coming from commercial real estate and 40% from from residential real estate to just flipped on that. So now commercial real estate is only picking up 40% and our individual property tax is more like 60%. So that burden has shifted. I think he's correct about that. I obviously don't agree with his assessment of Jennifer Bester's credentials on this. Among other things, I once had the opportunity to introduce Jennifer to a member of the California Legislative Analyst's Office who said she probably has a better understanding of the mechanics of educational funding than anyone else in the state. And she's one who, frankly, rarely, well, she doesn't want to be involved in political work, but does the analytical work that actually looks at what happens and models what happens when a tax like this comes into place. The big points for me are this. I am in general agreement with the points that Edith spoke to, and I think most of the board is, that California schools are inadequately funded. Our model for funding is broken. Proposition 13 is a disaster. Commercial real estate isn't getting reassessed, and so it's not carrying its burden. And this proposition will help schools statewide in aggregate, that it's good for schools statewide. The odd position for us is, from Jennifer's modeling, I think it hurts our funding at Sequoia and may also hurt the funding for the Redwood City schools and the Ravenswood schools. Now, when Alan Sarver and I first talked to Jennifer, I think we went in with the impression that this is incremental money. This is the $800,000 that Edith referred to was new money. And so if we lose part of it to Southern California, that's not so bad because we're also going to get incremental funding. The piece you don't take into account is we've been able to increase our funding in the district because property tax has gone up every year, essentially. We're now, I think I've heard, we have the best paid teachers in the state, I believe. And relative to other schools, our budget is in good shape. And that's because we've benefited from the growth each year. What this proposition does is it jumps up the amount that under assessed commercial real estate property is going to pay. But at least in some of those cases, that's money the district would have benefited from in the future. I think Trustee Norrie kind of recognized that in his comments, and I think that's what makes it tricky for us. Now I think you would support this initiative if you just want to get more money to schools throughout the state. And frankly, I see merit in that. That's actually a good thing. But when you're in a community that depends upon local real estate, commercial real estate and residential real estate, it's a much harder equation if you realize part of that gain is being shifted to other school districts throughout the state. I mean, for this reason, I'd find it hard to support the initiative.
Okay, I'll go next. And, I voted, right? Like I voted this weekend. It's a really cute picture of me like voting at the drop box with my mask. And I voted for Proposition 15 because I think it's good public policy as a citizen, right? And I basically believe it like tries to leverage, all of the problems that, is it Mr. Grief, am I saying it correctly? Mr. Grief described, I mean, those are good things. But as a trustee of Sequoia, it's not necessarily good for Sequoia. It's a wash. It's maybe a little bit of an improvement, or maybe it actually hurts us by setting the precedent that local community property taxes can now be taken away and run through a formula. Yeah, we use the formula, we use the basic aid formula, we get $200 per student under the basic aid formula as opposed to all of our property tax, right? We're not a formula school, that's the whole point. So, I mean, we could have the board pass a resolution on Proposition 19. Do we think that's good policy or not? It also probably raises tax revenues, right, but has equitable implications. What about the Privacy Act? All of these things are matters of public policy, but I don't see a compelling interest of the Sequoia Union High School District as such. And as a trustee, I'm opposed now to the idea of bringing a resolution forward on this matter, even though I personally voted for it as a citizen. So I don't quarrel with the arguments about why this is good public policy for the state of California, but I don't think it's in the interest of the Sequoia Union High School District as such, right, to adopt a resolution in favor of it. So that's my view. Other comments on this? So I guess at this point I need to figure out, I mean, we don't have a resolution in front of us to adopt. Who would be in favor of such a resolution? I'm just trying to decide whether we're kind of done with this now. So Carrie, you would be in favor of a resolution?
I would, because California School Boards Association has worked really hard on it. They want it to pass. And I think that sometimes in this world of education funding, we can't just be thinking of ourselves.
Again, that's why I voted one way. Okay. Yeah. Okay. So Carrie, would anybody else be in favor of it? Would anybody else be opposed? Like, I don't know, opposed. I don't think there's support to bring a resolution forward on this.
Okay.
So I think we looked at it and we've deliberated and we learned some facts. But I don't think this board is interested in pursuing. And by the way, I think, Grace, all of those districts that you cited that passed resolutions, they're all LCFF districts. They are not facing the kind of trade-offs, right? I think that we are. I mean, if you're an LCFF district, it's a win, right? It's unambiguously a win. But if you're a community funded district, then you have this question about, well, wait a minute, am I willing to give up control of my local property taxes for $1 million a year? That's a hard thing, and maybe less than I would otherwise get. So, okay. So I don't think there's support to move forward with a resolution on that. Let's go ahead and deal with our next discussion item, which is item 14.4, which is discussion of superintendent search. This was something that Interim Superintendent Leach insisted that we put on the board because she wants to make sure that we identify a successor as quickly as we possibly can, because the job is turning out to be maybe not as fun as she meant. No, I'm kidding. She's having a great time. We try to be very tentative in the background language here about what, if anything, is to be done. Obviously, there is going to be, I think, an election here pretty soon. And it is certainly the case, as a member who will be departing the board, I have no interest whatsoever and recognize that it would not be appropriate for me as an outgoing board member to play a role in the substantive selection process. But I do think that no matter who's on the board, it's probably the case that certain administrative steps maybe would be taken. And if you look at the timeline, you'll see that in the past, we did at least schedule in November, we scheduled the interviews with the search firms. Those interviews have to be special meetings, right? Because the board has to meet in public session. And so the only question, I guess, is, well, what does the board want to do? And is there any interest in at least reaching out to search firms to see about scheduling things? I don't know if you have anything else to say about this. Ms. Leach or Alan Sarver worked with me on this. He wrote the background timeline on this.
Sure. I went through the records from our last superintendent search, and both compared the various calendars we were given by the search firm as we worked with them, and then the dates of various meetings where these things happened to kind of put it all together. And really, the driving things that we had in our minds as we went through the process last time was knowing that we wanted to be to the best we could at the early end of the search for candidates, so that we would get the fullest range of available candidates. We wanted to have a leading search firm involved to be able to take advantage of all of their expertise and all of their contacts in getting the widest range of candidates in front of us. And we wanted to be able to very actively engage our staff, our parents and students, our communities in really giving as much input as possible into the search criteria that we wanted to use. And the way it laid out toward being able to make a selection in the spring, kind of barely ahead of the Great Rush, had us very actively engaged in the process by the beginning of November. It seems to me that we very much want to look at these dates and say we should be getting going pretty shortly to follow a similar trajectory this time. And I think the trajectory, the schedule was appropriate for all of the objectives we had. And I don't think that those objectives are dramatically different this time around.
Okay, thanks. Trustee Dubois and then Trustee Jack.
Yeah, so I am in no rush. There are districts that, close your ears, Crystal. There are districts that have interims for 2 years, 3 years. I am in no rush. Our priority right now is to get all kids online and engaged. Our priority right now is to get kids back to school.
I am in no rush, and this is the work for the new board. Just like the Supreme Court, we should be waiting on that appointment. This, I don't want to interview. I don't want to do anything. This is the work for the new board.
I'm not sure that I think the analogy is quite the same, but go ahead, Trustee Jack, and then Trustee Thompson.
I think I did have a Supreme Court joke at some point about this, but now I can't remember what it is. Yeah, no, I agree with Carrie. This is the work of the new board, but that does not mean that you should not be able to have a discussion about it after the election, right? So I think that's really what this comes down to, is being able to have a conversation with whomever is elected as part of the new board in order to make decisions. So, you know, Carrie has her opinion. I know the other, well, there's at least 2 other people on the call tonight who could potentially be sitting at the dais. So I'm sure they have their opinions. They may not feel the same way. So that is my thought, is to wait to adopt the schedule until after the election results are final. I just read an article that said some crazy number of ballots have already been returned, crazy number. So I'm not sure that we're going to have a problem of waiting weeks and weeks after election day. It may just be a human problem of counting the ballots, but that would be my recommendation, is to return to this conversation after the election results are finalized.
Thanks. That's 2 views for not moving forward. Trustee Thompson?
I'll be sort of a moderate voice, or closer to Alan, actually. So I remember being encouraged during the last search to get out early. And that was starting in work in November, and we were on a fairly tight time frame to do that. I guess I'd like to see us interviewing search firms in December with the new board, that we can line up. There aren't that many search firms involved in this. We should be able to get going, not do work apart from new board members, of which there's going to be at least 1, that we will actually know for a month beforehand who those board members are, so that we might, some of us or superintendent might be able to consult with them to make sure we're not out of line with their wishes on how we go forward. But I'd like to see us ready to move in December, so that we have the largest, best candidate pool to approach. And we get our selection of search firms, and actually the person who leads that effort for us.
Thanks. Ms. Salvatore?
I actually want to echo what Trustee Thompson just said. I think setting at least a target for the start of the timeline makes sense. That you don't make, I agree with the other trustees about not making any decisions on any of that until the new board is installed. But if you wait until after December 1st for the to even set the timeline, you're potentially compacting what needs to be a thoughtful process and potentially taking time away from the other work that the board needs to do during that time. And I don't think, while I am definitely, I hear what Trustee Dubois is saying about some interims are around for a couple of years. It's not a situation where the board doesn't think that at the end of the day, eventually you're going to hire a superintendent. And if the process gets started with interviewing search firms in December and that timeline doesn't seem to fit, then the board can decide at that point to extend the timeline. But I don't think waiting until after December to start the timeline makes sense.
Carrie, your hand is up. Did you want to go again, or is that left over from before? Okay. All right. I mean, I would just observe, our first board meeting, I think, after the election is not until November 18th, if I'm not mistaken. So I think this question about whether or not it's possible for the superintendent, to work with, people who we think have been elected, at least to check about their schedules and their calendars. Would you be available for, if we then come to a board meeting, on November 18th, and we at that point, vote to schedule meetings with the firms on such and such a dates, at least, to check with people in advance about, their calendar and their availability. I think just starting that on November 18th, right? And then like, okay, what's your calendar look like? And then you start calling up the search firms, and then it's Thanksgiving, and then you're not having your interviews with your search firms until the second week of December. So that's all. I mean, I'm just trying to, again, I do not want the dead hand of Alan Weiner on this process. I want to be clear, like I'm not trying to, put my thumb on the scale, but I'm thinking about the logistics of, if you have your first conversation about this on November 18th, I don't know when you start your interviews. I don't know when you start your community outreach. You're now into January before you are doing those things. So, but it sounds like nobody wants to authorize anybody to do anything now. So we'll move on to our next item. See, Grace, I lose too sometimes, right? I mean, you win some, you lose some, right? I mean, look, I just got shot down, right? Okay,
At the end of the day, Alan, we're still winners.
But we're still standing, right? We're still standing.
The strong remain.
Yeah, all right, so let's now move on to item 14.5, which is this kind of Talmudic question of figuring out how to rotate board seats, and whether we want to take on the issue of a protocol on board seat rotation. We used to sort of just do it by seniority when we had at-large elections, but now we are having different election district areas represented. And so the question, as you can see, that's framed here is, how would we want to deal? Well, we will have at least one new board member from an area that will be newly represented, if you will, on the board. Who knows who else representing trustee area C? Do those people simply go to the end of the dais, or should we have a different protocol? So Trustee Dubois, I don't know if this is still a leftover hand or if you want to weigh in on this one. It's a fresh hand.
This is a fresh hand. I have strong feelings on this.
Okay.
If it's appropriate, I want to make a comment, and then we do have a couple of the candidates watching. They may want to comment. I'd like to offer them that opportunity if they have thoughts on this. But my personal feeling, when I was a newly elected board member in San Carlos, I was perfectly happy being at the end. I felt like I had a lot to learn. I wasn't excited about being president. Our board's a little strange. Most board members that I know in the county and the state don't like being president because it's more work. And I believe that the president doesn't have any more authority, that they're not really a leader. I believe every board member has an equal voice, and the role of the president, and you've done a good job, President Weiner, the role of the president is to run the meeting and to bring out the voices of all of his colleagues. That is what the president does. It doesn't mean you have more power. It doesn't mean you can get stuff done, because we all have an equal voice. And yes, we win and we lose. So I was perfectly happy being at the end. A lot of board members I know around the state are perfectly happy being at the end. So it's not more power, in my opinion. But I do want to ask the candidates if they're comfortable talking about this, whether a new board member would want to be president or vice president. But I'm very comfortable with the rotation we have right now. I really wouldn't want to mess with it, but I'm open to changing my mind if the candidates feel strongly about a different way.
Other comments or questions on this? I mean, it is a funny thing, right? In some ways, I suppose you could seat people, and then at your first meeting, you could have this as an agenda item to discuss, before the organizational meeting. And your first meeting, I think, is on the 18th of November, which is before the annual reorganization meeting. You could also kind of take this up at the reorganization meeting if you wanted, right? Again, this may also be another issue that, although we're trying to plan for, maybe is not suitable for this board to decide, how the future board organizes itself. Trustee Jack? Yes, Trustee Jack, I saw your hand up. Am I wrong? You're on
Sorry,
mute.
no, it was the muting problem. It's a muting problem. Everybody has to do it once in every meeting. I'm going to take it as an unstated compliment that Trustee Dubois likes the rotation order that we now have, and you are welcome. I think it was painful getting us to this point, but also, I mean, to be honest, I think that, again, I go back to, I think what's fair is to allow the new board to set their rules, particularly with this whole, the district situation, which is a new wrinkle in all of this. And I think that this board in particular, when we went to district elections, specifically did it in order to bring in District E. And I think that the District E person, Ms. Stevenson, should have the opportunity to weigh in on that. So that's, you know, kind of where I sit. Also, I feel like we're losing our student trustee.
Yeah, although he wants to be at the front of the queue, I think he's angling to figure out how he gets up here, because it's awesome.
I know that look. I know that look. I did it all through college.
Because it's awesome, Trustee Sarver.
Okay, well, you know, I'm the one who's been raising this kind of regularly, and I'm happy to admit that it may be trying to over micromanage a process, and we might well just all decide to back off from it. But it really seems to me that we're entering into a different world with the trustee districts. You know, in our last election, which was the first time any trustee districts were represented, we had two incumbents both run unopposed, and we ended up with no change at all on the board and the same perspective of at-largeism that we had in the past. So there was no reason to kind of try and worry about this. But I had been wanting to have this conversation hopefully somewhat well in advance of the election, so that it would be just looking at kind of what's fair to districts instead of asking the new individuals where they feel like they should be placed. I do agree with the fact that the main distinction of the role of president is a heck of a lot more responsibility and burden. And I think the job that President Weiner has done this year has been remarkable under the greatest burden I've seen in 11 years on the board. And I'd hate to be the guy who ends up in the rotation having to follow that act and take on those responsibilities, but we'll see about that when we get there. I've had some input. One of the current candidates who's sitting in had actually emailed me a suggestion that all of the board members should rotate through the role of partnering with the president and the superintendent in setting the agenda throughout the course of the year. And my reaction to that is that we've really designated the vice president role as very much being a year of president in training, and being able to participate in that activity throughout the year to be as ready as possible to step in as acting president when needed, to get the hang of the communications and other specific responsibilities the president has. And that the rotation really is kind of a stepwise through. I've seen a lot of our local districts talk very proudly about how recently elected trustees became vice president and president within the first couple of years on the board, and that getting them to that point was a mark of pride of the operation of those boards. So I think I would be fine with the idea that, yeah, we make this be the first agenda item on the first meeting in December before the reorganization happens. We allow the entire new board to weigh in on it on that time. And then we immediately test fly it upon bringing the gavel down on the conversation. But I do want us to explicitly consider and respect how we are managing the voice of the different districts within our cycle and break it free of how new or not the individual is on the board. I don't want a district to end up getting thrown back to the start of the queue if they've got a new one. And for example, where I would look at it is with the new District E. If that's the person that becomes the end of the queue through seniority, and then that person does not get reelected, District E becomes the end of the queue again for the following 4-year term. And I think we would need to proactively take some thought.
No, it doesn't. Let me just clarify that. It doesn't mean it goes back to the end. The seat, it's not the seat moves, right?
Well, that's not the way it's stated now. Newly elected board members take the lowest ranking seat, the entry position. So
we
that's
could
what I want us to
we
address.
could change that. Yeah.
And I'd be I'd be happy enough to do that as the first item on the first meeting in December, if that's what everybody thinks.
Trustee Thompson?
I wanted to step in and say I support Trustee Nori for president, whether that's school board president or U.S. president. You're not old enough, I guess, on that. It sounds like we're moving towards making the decision once the new board comes on board, which sounds fine to me. I guess I'd add two things that to some extent Alan mentioned. One is the board president does have the power of setting the agenda. We've kind of attenuated that by saying it's done with the vice president, and also there's an explicit part of our agenda now where we suggest where the board can command to put items on the agenda. But the board president does a lot more work. Thank you, Alan Weiner, but there is some authority there. The only other point I'd like to make is in the case of Area 5 or Area E, where if we seat Area E at the end of the board, they may not have an opportunity to be board president during their tenure, since we have 4-year tenures on the board and there are 5 board seats. So I hope my colleagues will consider whether we might do some sort of deviation to take into account we've never had representation from Area E yet. Other than that, I presume we'll be settling on this with the new board.
Well, and the only other thing that I'll add is you could have the perverse impact of, like, you have somebody come in from Area E, start at the back of the queue, they move up a year, a seat per year, and if it's the seats that rotate, if that person isn't reelected, then the newly elected person comes in as the seat of president, right? So, and that maybe you don't want to have somebody who's never been on the school board before. I mean, I don't know, but y'all, clearly this is not to be decided tonight, and I think it needs to be decided when the new board is constituted. So we have concluded our discussion items. That brings us to our action items, but we have reached the witching hour. We've reached 10 o'clock, and so at this moment, if we are to proceed and take action, and I think there are a couple of action items that the interim superintendent would like us probably to take action on, we need to have a motion to extend our meeting.
I move to extend our meeting.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, we may continue now with item 15.1, which is approval of the contract for the interim superintendent. And as some of you may know, when we're dealing with a contract like this, there are actually statutory requirements that have to be met. So I will now meet those statutory requirements. This agenda item addresses our open session discussion and possible approval of what is a second addendum employment agreement with the Associated Superintendent of Administrative Services, Crystal Leach, regarding her assignment in the interim superintendent position. This proposed second addendum employment agreement also addresses the terms of her employment during the time that she serves as interim superintendent of the district, as well as the effective date of the Associate Superintendent of Administrative Services employment agreement. Let me tell you the following things about the agreement. The proposed second addendum employment agreement contains the following material terms. Number one, the term of Ms. Leach's Associate Superintendent Administrative Services employment agreement, her original agreement, which was dated July 1, 2019, and has a first addendum agreement dated July 1, 2020, shall be extended from June 30th, 2022 until June 30th, 2023. Second, the board will be conducting a new superintendent search process, as we have just discussed. Ms. Leach shall serve as the district's interim superintendent for a term that commenced on September 18th, 2020, and will terminate the day before the contractual start date of the district's soon to be selected new superintendent unless notified otherwise. At the conclusion of Ms. Leach's assignment to the position of interim superintendent, Ms. Leach shall continue to be employed by the district as the Associate Superintendent for Administrative Services pursuant to the terms of her existing employment agreement dated July 1, 2019, and her first addendum agreement dated July 1, 2020. As previously mentioned, the term of such Associate Superintendent Administrative Services agreement is extended by this second interim agreement to June 30th, 2023. 3, interim superintendent compensation and other terms of employment. In lieu of the annualized base salary provision included in Section 2A of the Associate Superintendent Administrative Services Agreement, dated July 1, 2019, and for the term of assignment to the interim superintendent position, the interim superintendent shall be paid beginning September 18th, 2020, based upon an annualized salary of $250,000 per year. While assigned to the position of interim superintendent, the terms of employment, including eligibility for stipends for master's and doctorate degrees, benefits, work year, leaves, vacations, holidays, professional meetings, dues, expense and transportation reimbursement, and district technology services shall be consistent with the Associate Superintendent of Administrative Services employment agreement dated July 1, 2019, and the addendum employment agreement dated July 1, 2020. That concludes this summary of the proposed second addendum agreement to the Associate Superintendent of Administrative Services employment agreement regarding Ms. Leach's assignment to the interim superintendent position. Are there any comments or questions on this item? I would then invite a motion to approve the second addendum agreement.
I move to approve.
Is there a second? Okay. All in favor?
Yes.
Aye.
Any opposed? Congratulations, Ms. Leach, on the board's adoption of the second addendum agreement to the first addendum agreement to the original agreement of the Associate Superintendent of Administrative Services. That's awesome. And we can sign it if you want.
And she really can do it for 2 or 3 years. There's no rush.
Okay, that brings us to item 15.2, which is adoption of resolution 1679, which would provide for an exception to the separation from service requirement for a new interim chief business official. Perhaps Ms. Leach, you would walk us through this item, which I think is actually an exciting development for us.
This may be a more exciting development for myself. In effort to still be able to serve in the most capacity within my new role, my previous role as Associate Superintendent of Administrative Services, I'm currently kind of juggling both. And areas identified that still need some substantial attention and monitoring is really on the business side of the house within our business department. So we have contacted School Services of California, which provides a list of retired CBOs throughout the state that are available for work. It turns out I'm sure you probably knew that they're kind of hard to come by. So in addition to that, I was able to seek out some colleagues that have recently retired from the County of San Mateo, one which I have identified from one of our feeder districts. The caveat is that because he has retired in July and has not had that 6 months of basically dead time within the first part of his retirement, an exception, and I think they refer to it as high need. I think that there's some additional language to that. That the board designates passes the resolution for exemption of separation to allow him to begin working in a very limited capacity during his retirement and prior to the 6 month start time that a normal retiree would have to begin to do any type of interim work.
Certainly very excited. This we were concerned about as being a need that was number one, important, and number two, potentially hard to fill. Are there comments or questions from board members on this item? All right, seeing none, then I would invite a motion to approve the adoption of resolution number 1679, providing for an exemption to the separation from service requirement for the interim chief budget officer.
Move approval.
I second.
Sarver moves, Jack seconds. This is a resolution, so Ms. Loese, I believe in accordance with our standard practice, we should have a roll, and it gives you a chance to kind of be back at the meeting again.
Student trustee Nori.
Yes.
Trustee Dubois.
Yes.
Trustee Jack.
Yes.
Trustee Sarver.
Yes.
Trustee Thompson.
Yes.
President Weiner.
Yes.
Motion adopted.
Excellent. Okay, so we have now completed our substantive work for the evening, and I thought it was a quite substantive conversation, although obviously there is much work to be done. That brings us to item 16.1, which is when we do our reports and also talk about potential future agenda setting items. So I just look to my board colleagues to see if anybody has anything they would like to share or raise at this moment.
Well, I think we've identified two that we want to stick on the first meeting in December. Once the new board is seated, the protocols of rotation
and superintendent search process.
Superintendent search. Thank you.
Okay. You will help. Well, I mean, I won't be around to do it, so, but I guess I'll be at the agenda setting meeting, maybe. So let's try to make sure that we remember that together. Other items, Trustee Dubois?
Just two things. CSBA conference is online. So I don't know if we want to talk about, just attending and then sharing out, because we're not going to be at the conference sort of talking about what we've learned. So we probably need an opportunity to debrief some other way because the district is spending money. It's a lot less money, but I still think we should share information. So that's the first item. Second thing, again, is this idea of getting some reports on engagement on a regular basis and reports on the hubs so that we can, even if it's bad news, that we just report on it and just, bad news can be embraced because we fix it faster, I think. And not that the board will be meddling, but I think it needs to be reported out to the community as well. So we need to have a schedule of seeing these reports and getting in the habit of it, of looking at it as a group. So.
Well, I think I certainly share the idea. And again, I think try to make the point that information about attendance, student performance, data on student results should be basically a standing part of the COVID-19 update, which is a regular item. So let's just, let's all, try to remember, like write it down, right? It shouldn't be a separate agenda item. Like if we're doing a COVID-19 update, we said all along, right, we need to kind of be monitoring very closely how distance instruction is going. And we had early reports, but I don't know that we have been, monitoring it. So take that point. I think that should just, again, be a standing part of the COVID-19 update. The debriefing of CSBA should presumably happen, after that meeting. And, on the hubs, right, so they're not going to start until the 19th, right, which is, I don't know whether we'll know anything by our next meeting, but, we can see, that meeting's on the 28th, right? So we'll know who showed up, right? We should know something about what's going on. Get the point, Georgia?
Yeah, yes, I agree that we should actually know something. I don't think that these reports are supposed to be super, what's the right word I'm trying to think right now?
Long.
Prepared, right? They're supposed to be snapshots. So let's have snapshots and let's have them with frequency. Yeah, an item is the Redwood City Police Reform Task Force, or whatever they called that. There was more words involved. I feel like there was equity somewhere in there and police reform. Anyways, there were conclusions that were made. And one of those conclusions involves Principal Priest and his SRO, right? So I think we want to talk about what the Redwood City Equity and maybe it was Equity and Race Task Force has brought up there so that we can have that discussion, as I think we should do.
I think we still had the notion of a larger presentation about SROs generally, and it's slipped because we've had other, we had some other things going on as it happens.
Yes, it's just that they've sort of pushed it forward now because they've actually concluded their task force, and that task force has produced recommendations. So.
I think that's right. But I mean, of course, that's one site, right? So I think if we want to think about SROs, we should think about not only Sequoia because of what Redwood City is doing, but so I think we will have to revert to the question of when we're going to have a presentation about SROs. I mean, I know staff has been thinking about it. It's not as if it's disappeared, but again, we've been, it's like 10:15, right? Because our agendas are pretty full. And I think we knew that tonight's COVID update and ethnic studies were going to be long, presentations. So, but worth it, right? And fun, right? Okay. Anything else?
I just have to say, I haven't seen my son's elder in so long. It was so wonderful to see that he dropped by tonight for that.
Okay, if there's nothing else, then I would invite a motion for adjournment.
Motion.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, well, with that cheery vote, we are done for the evening, and I'll see you all same bad time, same bad channel at my last board meeting. Bye-bye.